And we are very spontaneously live here in the WeWork in New York City. Not a planned stream. Adam and I started having a little back and forth about.
Well, we started by planning some budget stuff.
We started having a budgeting meeting, but.
And then Adar had to ask me, hey, Adam, when exactly do you think the conflict started? And then our conflict started.
And then we found an area of disagreement, and Adam said, let's go live. Let's talk about this on a live stream. I'm still finishing my dinner, so I'm going to eat while on stream. But Adam, when do you think the conflict?
So I think the answer I gave was Balfour Declaration. And I think you took some issue with that.
I could actually see that as a starting point. I would say it's the late 1800s because that's when the Zionist movement began, which it's true it took a few decades until that actually led to violence. But I think generally the attempt to create a Jewish homeland on land that was primarily inhabited by other people is inherently controversial. Now, I understand why us Jews wanted to establish that homeland, why we saw it as an opportunity and even as a necessity. But, it's still very clear why the Palestinian population would not be accepting of this movement, which began in the late 1800s. So I'm not opposed to.
I just didn't think that so I agree that it started then, but or at least that the idea, or let's say like Zionism, let's say like kind of began to take off for him then. But I don't think that necessarily led to the conflict at that time. I think the conflict took on so first Aliyah started 1881, 1882, you start seeing people on the land, and it's beginning to, and even like previous, we're saying, could you explain what does Jewish homeland mean to different people?
Well, it meant different things to different people back then as well, right? Some didn't even think we needed a state. We just needed a place that we have a presence and influence and control over. Others wanted a state. Others had some binational idea. So there are many different brands of Zionism.
But I think that it took on, so if you think about conflict, I think that when I look at like the 1880s, even early 1900s, I see a lot of kind of like interpersonal types of, like you would have people like, sometimes you would have like marauding Bedouins that are going into like these like Jewish villages and like robbing them. And then the Jews think that, oh, this is anti-Semitic, right? They just have like in their mind, they're seeing like the Tsar and the Cossacks or whatever coming to like anti-Semitically like harass them. And I don't think it took on this kind of like national nature at that point. It was just still the kind of violence that you expect to see in any type of society. You know what I mean? But then I think that with Balfour Declaration, all of a sudden it's like, oh, these guys mean business. They're here. They're not just they have plans, they have this like desire on our land, but now they have like great power backing. And let's put it this way, even if that isn't when it started, you would think that this was like the main fuel on the fire. Would you?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big one. And I think it's maybe a little bit of a semantic discussion is like, does conflict begin the moment that we see like some kind of violence or uprising against something? Or does it begin when the actions that caused that led to that violence or uprising begin? So, I think it really depends how we want to interpret it. But
do you think that Balfour...
It certainly didn't start on October 7th.
Do you think that Balfour Declaration was a legitimate document?
I think it shouldn't be for England to decide who gets to live on the land, even though they had control over it. But this is like really more, England was a colonial entity, and weren't of the land or from the land. It was a promise that they gave because we did brilliant political maneuvering to get the concept of Zionism to be popular in Europe. I don't think that's an organic way to establish a homeland.
Yeah,
and it almost tied us. It made us a colonial entity essentially. Like it very heavily tied us into England.
The colonialist project.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't indigenous people returning and establishing a homeland, maybe with the other local populations there, maybe even in opposition. It was very much England, the main colonial entity of this time, is going to endorse this Jewish homeland that will be primarily European Jews, right? So that very much seems like it's a colonial project.
Do you think that Israel would have emerged even without a Balfour Declaration?
Well, there was still mass immigration to the land, so whether it would have been a Jewish state or a binational state, I think, or some kind of a Jewish homeland that's not in the form of a state, I think that it very well may have still turned into something, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think it would have gotten more support than
From
it does
from
now?
Palestinians?
And from Arabs around, yeah.
Likely, yeah. But I think, yeah, but it's hard to know. I do think our biggest mistake was coming to a land and establishing a homeland in a place on a land that's inhabited by other people is impossible without resistance. And this is kind of what led to our disagreement that inspired the stream, so we'll get into it. So I think there's no way we could have tried to establish a Jewish homeland on land that Palestinians are living on without them fighting back. That is the norm. That is what every people before them had done. So it seems like the only way we could have achieved that is through a binational state and appealing to work together and build something together, not this is our land, we're taking it. There's no reason for that.
Yeah, I guess the only contention I would have with this is that it's in Callistos. I'm curious about what you just wrote about. You say many UK colonial entities eventually became nation states of their own that are of mixed ethnicities. Okay, so even piggybacking off, and if you can write some that you have in mind, that would be interesting. When I think about something like this, I think I don't think that the proposal that was on the books between, let's say, even in the case of like the partition plan in 47, and I realize we're fast forwarding like decades of conflict, but even in that case, I think that is, and if anybody in the audience knows this, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of many other situations in like colonial history that kind of ended with a proposal like this. So drawing historical comparisons between the legitimacy of Palestinian resistance to Jewish immigration, I think is tricky because it's not like we've seen this type of thing before.
So this is I think the crux of our disagreement. I think that the dynamic was this foreign entity came and replaced us. The partition plan was essentially saying you need to compromise and accept that they're taking half your land.
No, but it's not taking the land. It's taking it's sovereignty.
Yeah. But again, that's something that no people before them would have accepted. And we've had many other situations where one population replaces the other. And there's a set of outcomes that we've seen.
Wait, sorry, but again, I think you're already presupposing the replacement. In the 1940s, I'm not yet seeing replacement. I'm seeing the fear of replacement, but there wasn't replacement. And had they accepted 47,
no, hold on.
Replacement.
There were some minor, some in the early 1900s. There was some replacement by the Falahim whose land were bought.
Okay. So
they were displaced,
yeah.
and it's there was a great fear that there would be replacement. This was one of their main anxieties. Yeah. But I think it's not only replacement; it's also just sovereignty under people. I'll give you an example. Like when the Romans conquered us, if we didn't resist, we could have continued to live under Roman rule, but we don't want to give up our sovereignty. Right, we don't want to live under the rule of another population. And now we could say Palestinians didn't have sovereignty.
Well, no, but we did but that's the thing. We did accept Roman sovereignty until we didn't, and we got kicked out. Right.
Well, no, they conquered us militarily.
Yeah.
We didn't just welcome them in. We conquered them militarily and then continued to rebel, which is the norm.
I think for a while we had Herod, who was basically like a Roman client.
Yeah.
Right. So for a while we were kind of living under the tutelage of their empire until, who was it? Bar Kokhba?
Yeah, the revolts.
Yeah,
that was a few hundred years later.
That was
200 years.
That's
later.
the one that led to our expulsion.
No, it started before then. The expulsion was not like a single moment. It was over a few hundred years.
But the expulsion of the elites. It was
From
like,
the elites, okay.
Yeah. This was like,
So,
yeah.
anyways, just back to the point that the dynamic of a person coming and replacing a population, or a population coming and controlling a population, I want to find an instance where the population that happened to just said, okay, let's just do two states. Now, I actually think that Palestinians accepting two states would be better for all of us, but I don't blame them for not. I understand why they don't, because they're having a very human reaction to being replaced, or
Wait. But again, so like I think it's a human reaction.
It's
can't,
not only, it's the expected human reaction.
It's a likely human reaction. All I'm saying is that historically, we don't have situations where sovereignty is split whilst land remains static. So again, in 47, the idea isn't that anybody has to move. This isn't India, Pakistan. This isn't all of you move there, all of you move here. You can just remain where you are, and now you just have to, you can remain where you are, and now just simply vote for a different government, and you can have representation in the new government. So there's no displacement that is necessary.
No, again, it's still sovereignty. So like, we could look at countless examples. Had like Columbus came and said, we're not going to kick you off your land, but you're going to live under our rule. People don't accept that. It's still seen as you're still taking something from them. Even if you're not displacing them, you're taking away their sovereignty, or
you're taking away a sovereignty they never had, but you're taking away a sovereignty that they expect.
I think that it's a sovereignty that they had in a sense. It's a sovereignty the same way Native Americans had sovereignty. They didn't have a nation state, but that was land that they lived on for many generations. They were part of that.
It was
land.
Replacing a culture and a society and like a way of life, primarily.
Correct.
And I would accept that fully. And
but it's sovereignty in that sense, not sovereign in.
But it's just that is in a very metaphorical sense, right? It's
But again, I think I'm trying to get to the bottom of human psychology and how people respond. So it's not a single Palestinian said, well, since we never actually had sovereignty, therefore it's okay.
Right.
To them, it's identical. It's they're coming, they're establishing.
No, I understand.
Right?
All I'm saying is that this is unique enough in history where you don't have examples of this having happened, right? Like when the Native Americans, when the white colonialists came to America, that was never a proposal in the books, right? Well, it's just like you could live on the land, you could thrive on the land, but we're just going to split sovereignty and this type of what. No one ever gave them that kind of model, and so.
I mean, but no one would agree to that.
That might be true, but all I'm saying is like we can't then look historically and then say by historical example, the Palestinians are acting in accordance with history. No, in accordance with history, the whole Balfour Declaration and the whole partition plan is very different.
I would say that would only be true discussing specifically partition and not every proposal since partition, because then there was displacement and there was no deal on the table to allow people to return.
Well, if anything, there is precedent for partition, but partition in like the Greece and Turkey sense, or like the India Pakistan sense, but not partition of sovereignty in the proposal 47 sense. That I don't know of situations, and maybe people somebody can write about this. I don't know anything, but about this, that might be true, that there has been like examples like this, and they still ended in violence. Now, I'm not saying that the Palestinians were not right in resisting even a partition plan.
Well, I'm not even putting a moral judgment, right? Like I see Casimir here, and Casimir has a tendency to not really understand because he's so deeply rooted in his worldview. But no, I sometimes.
You know each other?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just giving a fair assessment. But no, literally, no one is making a moral argument, and he's saying, how are you making? Like he's pushing back against the moral argument, but that's not.
What's he saying? Okay.
He's saying Adar is incompetent. You're taking away our land. What made the American their land? Why is blood and soil legitimate? Like that's not.
Wait, I don't understand what that means.
it's just not relevant. He's not fully with us. He's just triggered all the time. He's just too emotionally driven to have a rational conversation. No, I'm saying it as it is.
Casimir, if you want.
I'm just saying it. Nobody. We're sitting here not making a moral judgment on things. We're literally trying to understand how humans respond. He's like, oh, why are you making a moral judgment? Shut up, bro. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Anyways.
All right.
Anyway. So I'm more interested in many people, their entire worldview, their entire view of the conflict is in having unrealistic expectations of Palestinians.
Yeah.
Saying they rejected. How dare them not compromise?
Yeah.
Who before them would be willing to compromise? Even again, we don't need an identical situation to be able to understand the psychology.
No, but the compromise I think is unique, because you're right in that. I just think we need to be clear about what they were asked to compromise on.
Mm-hmm.
They were asked to compromise on being. This is distracting. Saying
comment section. So well known.
So it's what they were asked to compromise on is being a 40% instead of having what, like 80% of the vote in all of mandatory Palestine, having 60% of the vote in the part that would be Palestine and 40% of the vote in the part that would be Israel. That's what they were asked to compromise on.
Right.
Good. Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying but I'm saying that, so that's just the details. I think it's fundamentally very similar to any form of, like, take different variations of what was offered native populations, whether it's you're sovereign there but not here, you need to leave, you need to stay, like whatever form of it, it's been rejected 100% of the times. Now, what happens afterwards? So, and I think this is important to look at to kind of give insight to what our options are, right? So sometimes when a foreign entity came to establish a homeland or to replace a population, whatever it may be, the native population fought until they were kicked out. We saw this happen in Algeria. We saw this happen in India. This happened in many colonial states. We also saw the other thing happen where the conquering population just genocided the existing population to the point where they were no longer, they didn't pose a demographic concern, so it's easier to integrate them into society, right? Like if Native Americans were 50% of the US population, how comfortable would white Americans or European Americans feel making them full citizens? There might be a lot more resistance towards that, but when they're just a few percent, it's like, okay, let them, that's fine. So one is the conquering population gets kicked out. The other is the conquered population gets genocided. A third is South Africa, where eventually they just say, okay, let's all live together. And that doesn't seem to be that's not a great, it's not a great success story.
Unless we follow what Callisto said, maybe the
Singaporeans
so might be a different example.
So yeah,
Singaporeans today are over 70% ethnic Chinese, but not exclusively, right? Like this is I think over 70%, but not 100%.
Yeah, I need to know more about Singapore. But were they in conflict beforehand? You definitely have a lot of countries that have a mixed ethnicity. I'm just trying to understand, based on where we are now, what are our viable options, right? I think two states still very well might work, but I still recognize Palestinian resistance to it. So we need to frame it and construct it in a way that they're going to say yes to, because just proposing something that is, again, people before them have accepted or would have accepted, for that to be the basis of our.
I want to hear Casimir on this point then, because you see, okay, in the last comment you're saying you're talking a lot about 47, 48, but rarely or never mentioned the 1920s, when the Arab War in the villages commenced and dozens were wiped out. I think that's what we're trying to target the conversation. But what Adar seems to be saying is, in the 1920s, why would you even expect that Palestinians wouldn't react in this way? Casimir, are you saying that you would expect Palestinians to react peacefully to the Zionist project? And if so, have you ever seen any examples in history where that happened? If you want to comment on that.
Exactly. Let's find a historical example, because it's true the 20s were violent. The violence was very understandable. It was a very human reaction like that. So people try to, look at Palestinians' actions where they're acting as humans otherwise would act, and on that basis, saying it's okay to oppress them or to not need to negotiate with them,
right? No,
or
but
any action we could take against them. It's like, well, they keep rejecting. Well, obviously they keep rejecting. That's to be expected. So the question is, how can we find a solution that is going to be much easier for
this
them
is
to
an
accept?
argument that is shared in, okay, he says, I would not expect them to react peacefully because they were always warlike conquerors and cheaters who would stab in the back the person who sold the land to a few weeks.
You see who you're talking to? Just some people aren't worth the time.
Well, no, okay, but I do want to get to.
No, he couldn't even answer your question honestly without just becoming racist.
Somebody says what WTF. But
sorry.
no, can you go back?
Yeah.
I do want to. There's in the book. In the book, Peace to End All Peace. Has anybody read that book? This is an excellent book. It's about how, the Allies' decisions during the First World War and how that led to the modern Middle East. In the book, he does say that unlike the Jews who came in very kind of diplomatically, having a very nuanced political culture of compromise and negotiation and diplomacy, the people that they met on the land were culturally unwilling to even engage in the kind of diplomacy that the Jewish side engaged in. So this isn't I don't think this confirms what Casimir is saying, but I think there is a point to be made. Are there cultural differences that make compromising over sovereignty already something that you could expect other cultures to compromise and negotiate? There are certain things in that culture that made them unwilling to.
Are there cultures that would be more willing to negotiate? I imagine so. To the extent that they would have accepted partition, I'm doubtful. I don't know, let's find an example. I mean, it's a pretty consistent history of rejection of a foreign entity coming in and taking your land.
No, but it's not taking your land.
Hold on, taking your land / establishing sovereignty. But it's also, we need to understand.
But establishing sovereignty is in 1947, the liberal position that would respect virtually every individual. To the point somebody's making there is it doesn't respect group rights or group ownership or collective ownership, but it respects individual ownership.
Yeah, but you're saying how it may have played out in practice when they were sure in practice how it would have played out is displacement regardless.
That's right.
Right. So it's not saying.
But why regardless?
Well, no, that was the fear, right?
The fear.
So again, they could not predict. They couldn't predict, let's say, the lives Israeli Arabs have today within Israel. It's possible how they could have seen the life they would have had, then they would have been more okay with sovereignty. But in their eyes, they're like, why should we be sovereign under a group of people who just arrived, who don't speak our language, who don't treat us with dignity and respect? They're going to rule over us. We've just been ruled for hundreds of years, and we finally got an opportunity for our own sovereignty. And now these Europeans of a different culture, a different language,
that's right,
who don't treat us well, they're going to reject that.
Yes,
it's just very obvious, right?
Yeah.
So
I think it is very obvious.
This whole
I just don't think it's historical though, because again, that had never happened.
Right. Yeah, but not that specific one. But it's still
but the specifics matter. Look, if it's just about the fact that it isn't displacement, it's the fact of I wouldn't say invasion, maybe an intrusion of foreigners that are destabilizing your indigenous culture, creates resistance. That I think is true. Should that resistance? Do you always expect that resistance to manifest violently? I don't know. You seem to, but
yeah. I just haven't seen an instance where it didn't. I mean, you had some anti-colonial movements like in India, but that was Gandhi being very much an outlier and unique and special. It wasn't only nonviolence. There was violence towards British rule of India. And again, I think we'll never find an example whether the attempt is to come and replace or it's to establish dominance. Most colonialism was not settler colonialism. It wasn't with the goal of replacing. It was just the goal of establishing sovereignty. that was rejected 100% of the times. No one said, yeah, come rule us. That's never happened. So
yeah, no, but it's, I mean, it is fair though to say that it's, no one has made the kind of, no one came up with like a liberal and democratic structure.
Yeah, but
that would include the people that you
liberal and democratic might not be what they wanted, though.
Yeah.
Right? So
but that is what is respectful for individual rights. I'm just saying like,
yeah, but again,
no,
I think that's just a semantic difference.
Okay, but it's a semantic difference.
If no population has ever accepted being ruled by another population without violence, to think that, well,
it's not ruled by another population, it's to co-govern with.
No. I mean, it's a state with Jewish nature. Like it's not just a secular. It wasn't a secular binational state. That's not what we were building. It was a Jewish state. The governance structure was probably not clearly defined. There was there's still no constitution. So to think they could have some documentation to read and get an understanding of what government, no, for them we're being ruled by a foreign population.
That's in 48. But all I'm saying is like in the 20s, would you not have had the opportunity to co-create what that should look like?
That's what we should have done.
No, but you had unanimous refusal by the Arab side.
Because that was already after decades of.
No, that was in the 20s.
Yeah. No, the 20s, violence began after decades of building
I'm saying
frustration.
Balfour is 17, right? Like whatever happened in the 1880s, 1890s, I think took very little political shape.
The violence began. I think there was an instance in the north. It was the Battle of. It's considered the first instance of violence.
You're thinking of Tel Hai.
Yeah. But the tension was building up for decades prior. Violence doesn't erupt.
But even in Tel Hai, I wouldn't think that it was like a very like nationally driven. It wasn't very ethnic. I think it was just some. They thought we're with the French and the English. I think it wasn't.
No. That had a ripple effect, though. That had a ripple effect. Yeah. Exactly. That was the start. That was like the first instance of violence, Tel Hai, which had a ripple effect, and then we saw like, 1929 Hebron massacre was a major escalation, but it wasn't an attempt to build a binational state. The attempt was to build a Jewish state.
Yeah.
There could have been a strong appeal to you could live under this Jewish state. You could vote. You could this.
Well, it wasn't clear yet what the Jewish state would be. I'm just saying, like,
right. No, exactly. So it's not like they could just sit there and be like, you know what, this seems like a good deal. Let's accept.
No, but they didn't. It wasn't a deal yet. It was just an open invitation to discuss what the nature of the Jewish sovereignty on the land will look like.
Correct, and that was outright rejected.
Outright rejected
for obvious reasons.
I think for clear reasons.
Yeah.
But I think that we should. I want to leave the door open to Jews to accept, even I should choose my words wisely here, because it can't just be the case that no people can't accept being like at a 45% minority at another place without feeling like the only solution to this is violence. I can conceive of situations where Jews or non-Jews will in the future have to accept a situation where they are a 45% minority and still feel like they can react to that non-violently.
Yeah.
If you're closing the door on that, you're saying, no, sorry, 45%, no, it's totally legitimate.
That's not, if there's a population shift through natural demographic change, through birth rates.
Not even natural, just like diplomatic and political kind of like rearrangement.
So again, we're not, if you want to make the case that there's other approaches we could take that are nonviolent, I'd be the first to endorse those. My whole thing is let's find nonviolent ways to do things. But I want us to.
I don't know, the way you're reacting to Casimir seemed quite violent.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I match people's energy, as you can see. You come with respect, I treat you with respect. You act like an asshole, I do too. But where were we?
Then your whole spiel.
Oh yeah. No. I'm all. So let's definitely leave the door open. And I constantly talk about nonviolent routes Palestinians could have taken. But the fact that they didn't take those nonviolent routes, right, I don't hold against them. Like that's the only point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
This whole idea, it's, Palestinians are at fault because they refuse to accept. Okay, that makes sense though,
Yeah.
right? So don't like. There's only so much we could hold that against them. The same way today, the recent polling showed that over 70% of Israelis think Palestinian civilian lives should be taken into consideration to either no extent or little extent. That's actually pretty normal numbers for a population at war with another population, right? So I'm not going to hold that against Israelis for being that extreme and not caring about civilian lives. I get it.
Yeah.
Like I get it, right? So one is just accepting that humans are going to human, and then trying to inspire a different way of doing things, right? So I get why Israelis support the destruction of Gaza, but I think it's wrong for this reason, right? So I think that's really what I'm trying to get at. We can't hold Palestinians and the rejection of Israel against them. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
We just need to try harder and be more creative when coming up with a solution.
Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense the way the Palestinians reacted. It makes a lot of sense the way the Jews reacted, right? If humans are going to human, all of human history just makes sense. I mean, of course they would.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There isn't any action that a human does that isn't human. So it all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So should we do some comments?
Agreement.
No, that was the point. Yeah.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, this is Adam. Adam is my co-founder for the new company we launched, headon.ai, which is really all about having disagreements with a platform that has an AI facilitator helping people speak longer, understand each other better, and hopefully find common ground. We'll do some Q&A. So yeah, Casimir, you're still saying.
Well, let's start from the time. I think there was some.
I just want to just real quick. You're saying reciprocity. The Jews in the 20s got massacred, and then a decade later matched the energy. You're still looking at this as like an issue of blame, where we're not making these moral judgments.
No, but even if you want to make a moral judgment, let's make a moral judgment.
But I just want, like, some people are unable to actually hear a conversation. It's the second you say something that falls into the category of anti-Israel, there's like this defensive, there's trigger where they don't hear anything else. So we haven't made a single moral judgment here. We're trying to understand human nature and how they respond.
But okay, that might be fair. But can you, even if you read this, reciprocity, the Jews in the 20s, no, whatever.
I'm just pulling it up.
Oh, the Jews in the 20s got massacred, and then a decade later in the 30s matched the energy of the Arab conquerors. Isn't it like, by your lights, it's just human nature? I mean, of course they would.
For sure, yeah. Obviously,
of course the Jews would.
Obviously, we're going to be violent in return.
Yeah.
Now, exactly right. So, if someone were to claim that Palestinian violence is understandable, but Jewish violence is, or vice versa, then I would say there's probably a fundamental flaw in the objectivity of which you're looking at this. Because if you really think of human nature and how we respond, violence from both sides is actually to be expected. It doesn't mean it's okay or justified. Right? There's a difference between an expected human action and then recognizing whether that action is good or bad. I think violence should always be the last resort, and humans have a proclivity for violence. We're a relatively violent species. But part of making progress as a human species is to move away from our violent tendencies and only use it when we have no other options. So that's generally how I look at it. You want to add to that?
Let's look at the Tantura
one.
Have you guys watched the Tantura documentary?
I actually haven't seen it, but I got the gist of it. Have you seen it?
I just saw some clips. The concerted effort from the IDF to stage an accepted evacuation from the Palestinian side in 1948 was very interesting. Yeah, I don't know if I have.
That's from Ibn Saifi. Yeah,
Ibn Saifi.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. So
I don't know if I have comments on that, except that I know a lot of things were taken out of context that were trending on like Instagram or TikTok. But I also think that it depends who in the IDF was doing that. I think some of them. I think more of that came from the Irgun than from Haganah. So I think a lot of it was like pre-IDF. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it too. Are you talking to Ibn?
Yeah, to Ibn, yeah. Okay, the imagination scene. That I actually believe.
Wasn't the theory that they did not have similar views of owning land as the colonials?
I do believe this very strongly.
Yeah,
I think
what's your take on
as
it?
I see it, it's kind of like it is a collision of like property rights paradigms more so than anything else. I think that what the settler Jews had in mind with respect to what property rights means was probably orthogonal at 90 degrees, totally opposite of what the Palestinians on the land believed was a legitimate right to land. I think it is a little more similar to like the British coming to the Americas and saying, "Oh no, of course this belongs to us because the king said so," and the Native Americans are like, "Who the fuck's your king? We're not interested in that." Like,
Right,
doesn't
right,
mean
right,
anything
right.
to us. Right?
Right.
I do believe it's primarily like a conflict of property rights paradigm.
It's interesting. So I'm not familiar with that distinction. What is true though is the early Zionists did refer to themselves as colonialists. That was the term they used. Like there was
I think that they would. I don't really know how you translate it, but I think colonists would probably be better.
Yeah,
than colonialists. Because I make a distinction between colonialists and colonists.
Did they make a distinction?
Like,
I'm not sure, but
like
there, there was many entities that had the colonial or colonist in it, like the Zionist colonist organization. Like there were many like those, which again that was there was nothing that was a trendy term. If anything, it wasn't seen as wrong. If it was seen as wrong, it would have been put on. It's like, no, we're going to go colonize the land, you know?
Or like I would say like build a colony.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is it's like even today in Hebrew it's different, right? To say to build a colony is different from like to colonialize. And
correct.
And even when we say colonialism, you say colonialism. That's different from hityashvut.
Correct. One is to settle. One is to settle. The other is to colonize.
Yeah.
Right. Is there no Hebrew word for colonialism?
Moshava? No, moshava, no. So that's another loaded term. But I don't think that we use
itnachlut. What's the root of mitnachel? Is what settlers are often called in Israeli society.
Right.
But people who are more sympathetic to them would call them mityashvim.
Yeah.
Which is more of a direct translate to settler.
Yeah.
But that seemed to have a more positive connotation.
Oh, mitnachlim might be more like a squatter even?
Litnachel, yeah, I guess more like a squatter, which is the more common way it's described in
these
Hebrew.
Right, yeah, that's right.
Which is interesting.
For West Bank.
For West Bank settlers, yeah.
Maybe somebody has responded to everything we just said.
It's possible.
Maybe right from the beginning.
Do you actually believe peace is achievable after?
Oh wait, no, that sounds like a diversion.
Have you seen the Bible files, BB files?
The BB files. No, I want to though.
Yeah.
Somebody has. Tell me where to do it. Okay, so maybe we'll just find. Ownership equals first comer claim to a means that can be rivaled over and bordering something scarce.
Yeah, Fahed also. I want to read.
Yeah.
I want to read Fahed's real quick.
Yeah.
By the way, Fahed's a Gazan friend. He left a few weeks before October 7th, so really Jordan.
He says, it's crazy that history should determine what kind of rights I will have today. Even if my father committed a horrific crime, by law, I'm still a free man. What do I have to do with al-Husseini's role?
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair. We definitely should not inherit guilt. You know, we shouldn't inherit guilt.
Yeah, we're not Christians in that sense.
Is that what they? It's interesting. It's a Christian thing and it's a woke thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Honestly, I think that'd be an interesting stream to kind of look at the similarities between like Christian fundamentalism and wokeness, because wokeness actually seems to have come out of more of like a secular America, but it has so many religious elements to it. You know,
yeah, I mean, it might have adopted those because of the lack of religion.
Right, there was almost like a need.
Maybe.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you actually believe peace is achievable after 10/7? Yeah, for sure. Peace is always achievable. There will never be a situation in which peace is not achievable. it all comes down to our ability to achieve it, and taking the right steps to get us closer to peace. So I think there's always a set of actions we could take to allow us to achieve peace. What those set of actions are very hard to determine. After October 7th, maybe those set of actions are even harder to determine, but they still exist. That's my general outlook of this conflict and all conflict. There's always a solution. And there's actually many solutions, I believe. What would you say?
Yeah, I think it's achievable, but I don't think that we should set our goal as that too quickly, because I think that there are many stops along the way, and we should aim for those first. I mean, I do think it certainly is achievable, but I don't think that should be like the next stop, right? That could be a final destination. We have many stops along the way that can get us there. And I think that with every stop along the way, then it becomes a little bit clearer. Right now, maybe you're asking this, do you actually believe peace is achievable after October 7th? It's not even in your horizon, right? You're not seeing it. It's past your horizon. Of course, you can see it. As you get closer, the horizon kind of shows up. And then at some point, that stop is revealed.
Yeah. Alun goes, I think creating a Jewish state on land where most people are not Jews is inherently violent. Like that itself is an act of violence.
And could not be made peacefully.
And cannot be made peacefully.
Okay, like even like theoretically, okay, he says inherently violent. I don't think that's inherently violent.
I think it depends how broadly we want to define violence, but there's definitely something, it's an act of aggression.
It could be an act of aggression, yeah. But even then, like,
is there a way it could be done in not aggression? Yeah.
No, but look, like I think it's, if anything, it's an act of naivety, right? Like more so than aggression. Like if I'm just trying to picture like a Zionist in the 1920s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before the conflagration took on like a very kind of like decidedly ethnic lines, right? Or like religious lines or national lines. What does that look like then? Like you go to the house of this Zionist, he's living in Tzfat or whatever, and he's dreaming up a homeland for Jews, a national state for the Jews. Are you sensing any type of aggression from him? I don't think that's the energy. I don't think that's the vibe. The vibe might be a little bit more delusional. It might be more like, oh, we could do it, and maybe we can even like lift up the Arabs around us. Maybe they were just paying lip service to that. Maybe they meant that sincerely. I don't know. Maybe they thought, oh, there aren't that many Arabs here, hundreds of thousands. In 1933, Hitler rises, and all the Jews are now starting to move to. So, okay, maybe we could just win like this. We could just have a lot of them show up. Are the Arabs even all that like stoked on a national kind of like homeland for them? Not that clear that they ever have been. So like I feel like,
but I think already by like
late 20s.
I think even before the 20s, we understood there would be resistance to this idea.
The other thing is like maybe you just buy enough of it, or maybe you could even just like pay for some of them to leave, and then the rest of us can just live together. I think it's more delusional than aggressive.
Are those mutually exclusive though, right? Sometimes your delusion can be acted out in an aggressive way. Like, I mean, was it delusion doesn't mean not aggressive though. It just means it's not intentionally harmful. Like
right,
we're the early, we're the early Zionists. Did it come from a place of malice? Did they want to harm Palestinians? No, it came from a place of self-interest.
Yeah.
They saw an opportunity. The concept of the nation state was being popularized. They saw the Ottoman Empire was starting to weaken. A man with a dream, if you will it is no dream, as Herzl once said, thought that this is an opportunity and started creating movement around it. So it certainly came from a place of self-interest and opportunism, but ultimately, it's perceived and felt as an act of aggression to those to those living.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. By the way, they asked what you eat, and we got halal guys. Do you know that?
Yeah, we try to support different communities. So we
Egyptian.
A little Egyptian immigrant, and Adam is fluent in Arabic.
Slowly.
He's been learning with a Gazan teacher, but his grandmother is actually from Alexandria. So he's also in. His
Also a cousin.
last name
I'm also a
today is
cousin.
Adam Becker, but it was actually changed in Ellis Island in the 20s from Al-Masri to Becker.
Habibi
Right?
al-Masri.
No, but yeah, Habibi is his maiden name, which is cool. Imagination scene goes, saw some crazy footage showing cats eating bodies from within Gaza. It's being shared on Twitter, and also another one with a dog. Have I seen this? Yeah. I think normally, I think there's a lot of debate over the death toll in Gaza, and I think one of the ways to know that the current death toll is likely understated is that people are being eaten by dogs and cats on the streets. To me, that's suggestive of just a lot of people being unaccounted for, and not having a system to clear bodies, bring them to the hospital, identify them. So yeah, it's horrific that cats and dogs are eating humans, and I think it is also indicative of a much higher death toll than what's being reported.
Fahad says we have al-Masri family in Gaza. Yes.
Well, al-Masri is one of the most common last names amongst Palestinians, isn't it?
So I think this connects maybe cynically to the point that Casimir here is making. He says they bought the lands. No, he says they saw an opportunity, quote unquote, right? He's quoting you.
Mm-hmm.
But then they acted peacefully and they just purchased land, largely empty land away from what was promised to them. What's the problem with that, Adar?
First of all, who did they buy the land from, and how did they get the land? That's something like.
How did those owners get the land?
Yeah. How did those owners get the land from the Palestinians that were living there for many generations? Right.
But should that be the concern of the Jews who are trying to buy the land?
Are we making a moral judgment or
Yes.
trying to understand?
Moral judgment. So what's the problem with this? What's the
No.
What is the?
I would say for Jews to buy that land, I think is perfectly acceptable. They did displace people living on that land, right? It wasn't like we're going to buy this, but you could continue to farm it. Like it's like some thousands of Palestinian farmers were displaced from those land purchases.
Yeah.
I think there's a moral case against that.
Well, even today, if you buy a property.
Well, again,
Brooklyn,
it really depends. So, like, if you have something where I don't know if there's a comparable situation, because the way the Ottomans got the land was very specific. It was during the Tanzimat, when the Ottoman, this was 1850s, the Ottoman was trying to modernize. They started creating this concept of land ownership, but also they said that all Palestinians need to send their sons, all landowners need to send their sons to the army. The loophole for Palestinians was, wait, I don't want to send my son to fight for an empire that I don't support. I need him to work the farm. So the way was to give up that land to Ottoman landowners. There's kind of like a loophole, so they won't need to send.
They could be Ottoman, but they could even be Palestinian, or they could be anybody who's a subject, right? So, like, I think there were like Syrians.
Yeah, right. So that's how they got it. Which again, you could say, okay, well, tough luck. You gave away your land, and now you need to leave it, right?
But I think that does go back to the point of like different paradigms of land ownership.
Yeah, exactly. And again, people who, if what you say is, you gave it up, tough luck, that's generally like lacking empathy and a perspective people generally have when they're the ones in conflict. So it's not uncommon to hear like Israelis say, oh, tough shit, you lost your land, you gave it up. When other people see that, they're like, that's borderline psychopathic to think that way. So there's a big difference with how people involved in a conflict look at where they completely lack empathy for one another. And then people observing it, they see that, they're like, well, that's not okay conduct. And then they make a judgment about people's behavior, and they're making.
But do you think that? Okay, but
I'm just saying, I understand why somebody in a conflict would have a kind of psychopathic outlook of the other.
Yeah, no.
But I expect those who are not involved in a conflict to be able to take a step back and have a more empathetic worldview.
But do you think that it takes psychopathy to explain why somebody's feeling that, yeah, you go into somebody's land, you purchase it, those people, insofar as they are displaced, can themselves be compensated for it, as it happened most of the time? That isn't.
Oh, I'm not talking about that specifically. I'm talking about saying buying the land, the fact that European Jews could come and buy land from Ottomans after Palestinians were living there for many generations, when we take into account how they got ownership of the land, to think that that is just okay to displace them and there's nothing
not just
morally wrong with it.
No.
I would say that is a position that generally lacks empathy, and we could judge it as such.
Okay, but morally, but that's the thing. Like those people, many of those Palestinians got compensated for it. I'm not just saying that. Of course, like the land sale went to the Ottomans.
What was your competition?
No compensation.
What was your compensation?
Money.
No, what do they get?
How much money?
Yeah.
I don't know the numbers. I remember this, but I remember in the beginning when this is in the Benny Morris book about the birth of the Palestinian refugee problem revisited. He speaks about some of the Palestinians that felt like they weren't compensated enough, coming back, knocking on the doors of the purchasers, right, the buyers, and saying that they need even more money. And then the Jews gave them more money, and then they left. And that's a lot of the situations and how things ended up getting resolved was.
Okay, cool. So
so in that case, is there still something unethical in your mind?
No, not if there's compensation and they agree to it.
Yeah, and what if that's the case in the vast majority?
No, then I think that's fine. And I also think if all we're talking about is land purchases and living on that land, that's different than having sovereignty over another group of people.
Sorry, I saw Abdallah.
Oh yeah.
Nabil,
I wanted you to see this.
Thank you very much. I would love to go to Alexandria one day.
There we go. We have a viewer from Alexandria.
There you go. I'll come. I'll let you know.
No. I think not only if they're compensated does it makes it way more legitimate, but also I don't even think that is the problem. I don't think the problem was Jews living on the land. Jews have lived on the land for thousands of years. Right. In fact, in the 1850s, 1860s, and 70s, before Herzl Zionism, there was immigration from Europe into Ottoman Palestine because conditions for Jews were preferable there than in Europe.
Sure.
So it's not an issue of Jews buying land and living, buying land and living on that land.
Yeah.
It's establishing sovereignty over a different group of people. That is generally what was rejected. It wasn't Jews living there.
Wait. Now, by the way, that is the situation that the Jews were rejecting, right?
What?
That they said enough having sovereignty over us.
Correct. Yeah. They were.
So it is in the same way that it is justified for Palestinians to resist. It is also then, by the same light, justified for Jews to resist Muslim sovereignty over them for hundreds of years.
It is legitimate for us to attempt to have sovereignty and be able to determine our destiny, for sure, especially given our history. But
no. I'm making it tighter.
No. I don't. It's legitimate for us to want to have sovereignty, but legitimate for us to want to have sovereignty over another group of people.
No, not it doesn't matter.
To want it, but to attempt it, I think that's not.
No. It's not about the desire for the others. I'm just because Palestinian sovereignty would imply sovereignty over Jews.
Correct.
So all I'm saying is like it's all. How is it different from the Jews saying I just want to shake up the yoke of Muslim sovereignty over me? Well, like why is one kind of legitimate in its use of violence and the other isn't?
No. Well, again, I don't think violence is legitimate in either case.
But why is one more expected than the other? Why is one more human nature than the other? Is one more expected than the other? It sounds like are you surprised? Because you could be surprised that the Jews didn't react violently in the 1920s. Why didn't they just kick out everybody?
We did that. We always responded with violence. Violence was our response as well.
Well, no, violence was our response.
So if we're comparing, like they have every right to reject sovereignty, the same way we have a right to try to achieve new sovereignty. Is that what you're saying? But we're talking about something fundamentally different. It's a foreign population. At the time, it was a foreign population that we were oppressed by Europeans. So our solution, right? It wasn't Palestinian Jews living in Ottoman Palestine. That's not where Zionism came from. I'm not saying their conditions were great. It was better than most places in the world. But that wasn't a movement of self-determination from within. This was a population, a foreign population that came to establish sovereignty over land. That's not the same as a minority group wanting sovereignty.
Right. I'm just saying that you should then be surprised, or if they did, you would think that it's totally legitimate.
For what?
If the Palestinian Jews, who are not European, were to rise up violently to try to
change their conditions.
Yeah. To say I don't want Palestinians to have, I don't want Muslims to have sovereignty over me, you would say, well, it sounds perfectly legitimate.
And what are they suggesting instead?
That they split things by population centers, so that the majority Jews
they would have wanted their name some kind of federated system where they have
federated or not federated, but they're reacting violently.
That's perfectly legitimate for them to want that, and I could understand why they would.
Okay, but
violence would not have been a good response, but I would have been able to understand.
So it feels like.
And by the way, violence has been our response. You know, not only that, like.
No, I just think it would have. I think.
As violent as they've been towards us, we've been way more violent towards them, right?
Yeah, no, but in different times, right? So like I think violence in the beginning when the yeshuv was so small would have just been a death knell, right? It would have been suicide.
But it started. So it was in the 20s. Even in the 20s is when we had enough of a paramilitary to fight back.
Yeah, but
even Tel Chai was an example of us having a military.
I wouldn't call it military.
Paramilitary.
Yeah.
Well, militias.
Well, we had some
terror organizations.
We had some security companies.
There's there's this one gangster who he died in that. He was in
he lost the Trumpeldor.
Was it Trumpeldor? He was Bukhari, or he's from Dagestan or something. He was one of those mountain Jews, and he was like. He didn't have an arm or something. Yeah. So he died then, but he was supposedly a cold-blooded killer. That guy.
But didn't he say that Tov Lamut Me'al Atzenu or something?
I'm not sure.
It's good to die for our country. We made a mess here in the chat. Nice.
Yeah, that's how it goes. But yeah, so again, I think if there was like an attempt for Jewish sovereignty in communities that they were like majority, I think.
Okay, but you can translate the claim to now.
It still might not have been perceived well, but I think it would have been perceived as better. Like we see it, there's generally resistance for small groups to gain independence. Like generally the sovereign nation or the more powerful entity isn't so open to that idea. Yeah. But I think it's certainly a legitimate desire, right? Like Catalonians want Catalonia, like I get it. Kurds want Kurdistan, right? Like, but it's interesting. Has there ever been a situation where the bigger nation just accepted it? Never, huh? So again, there's no reason to think that had we wanted little autonomous zones on Ottoman Palestine, we would have.
I mean, that was the original proposal, I think, to the Sultan. You know, that the Jews would just have like autonomous regions.
And what happened with that?
I think he said, "Don't call me again."
Is that no, exactly. That's what I'm saying. That was almost entirely always rejected. Yeah, exactly. That would have required also some resistance to achieve. Yeah, that's not surprising. The Sultan don't call. Ibn says, "I'm surprised, Adar, that you haven't had streams with Benny Morris or Ilan Papa yet. If you could get them, yeah. So I'd love to host them for a debate. That'd be interesting. Benny Morris, I reached out to him once, but like it was through an agency and they wanted money for him to come on. So I don't know. I got to figure out how to get it. If anybody wants to email them, like one of the ways to get more guests on the show is I'm giving everybody permission right now. If you want to see a guest on the show, reach out to them, see if they're interested. And if they're, just connect us. You can find my email on the YouTube page under contact. You can find how to connect with me here in the description. So that's really the best way to get more people on the show, to help me with the outreach, because it's not something I have all too much time to do. But yeah, I'd love to have them both on or either one.
Because from the Muslim point of view, can you scroll up? Callistus. Because from the Muslim point of view, you can be exactly just like them if you accept Islam, that is convert. Okay. What was instead was separatism. Racist British and Arab laws prevented the populations from mixing in most settled places. Problem: Benny Morris is a leftist, so while competent on history, does not understand ownership outside group context. Makes debates pointless since neither side can claim. I love this guy. Militia seems accurate.
Can you tell that he's a libertarian?
Yeah. But can you?
You see, libertarians are generally and again, Casimir, I'm not saying this about you. It's a general statement, but I think they're often like a high IQ, low EQ community. They're smart but lack social awareness, and they seem to get like good at like theoretics but not in practice. That's what I've noticed. But I have a lot of libertarian values myself. So.
Mountain Jews, Gandalf.
He's laughing that I said
this.
Mountain Jews. Yeah, Mountain Jews, from the Caucasus. Actually, the Khazars, right? So
Bro, you know who else were the Mountain Jews? The Atlas Jews in Morocco. They were living in the mountains there even before like the Spanish Inquisition.
Really?
Yeah.
Atlas Jews.
Atlas Jews.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
So,
living in the mountains.
But yeah, like the Khazars, they're Mountain Jews, for example. Yeah.
Okay. Din Trumpeldor had a little group until Chaim.
Yeah, that was the first instance of true violence, I think, between both sides.
But I think that
Trumpeldor died. He was one of 4 who died during that.
Yeah, but I don't think it was
It was early.
It was early, and I don't think it was nationally driven in the way that we can look it up.
Yeah. I started listening to the podcast by the Martyr Made podcast, which was fascinating. But then I stopped at a certain point. But he talks about this pretty in depth. That's the guy that had the revisionist world.
How do you give the link to this?
For people to join? Who wants to join?
Can you send it to me? Thanks. Sorry, guys. Nothing to do with it. Who are you, Adam? Sorry, I missed the beginning of the live. It's the first time I see you on Sulcha.
Hold on. By the way, guys, this live is all AI. It's not really
real Adar.
Damn, they caught on us. Okay, stream over. Wait, but who are you, Adam? Sorry, I missed the beginning. Adam. So Adam and I actually met through Sulcha. He's the first patron ever. Oh, and on that note, thank you to all the patrons. If you want to support the show, you can find how to do that in the description. Our visionary members are, I don't call out the visionary members anymore, which I probably should, but Renee Gordon, Adam Boss-Becker, that's him, Neve Goldstein, David Edwards, and Jewel Takashi. So Adam was the first patron, and then we became friends. And then a few months ago, he reached out to me with this crazy idea, just crazy enough to work, just brilliant enough to change the world. And it was to create a new platform. And I joined. I decided he offered for me to join him as his co-founder. It was too big of an opportunity to turn down. So here I am. Adam, do you want to give a brief?
But I think that Gandalf might be right. I don't know if this is all AI. It isn't us. But we do think that the incentive structures are all wrong with existing social media, and it's been dividing us and polarizing us unnecessarily. And we think that we have a potential to change things and turn them around with AI and with Gen AI and with LLMs. My background is in AI. I've spent the last few years doing that while Adar was doing Sulcha. And I think the first time that you said you might step down from doing this full time
because of my other company,
the other startup, I freaked out and I was like, oh man, now I have to go into doing this. And but now I think both of us are doing it.
There we go. Yeah, that's how it happened.
Imagination Scene's asking, how are you going to train the AI for this new project?
On actually conversations just like this, we already have interns and community members that are having conversations both in Discord and on platform. And that's really how we're training the AI. It'll take time till it's a master facilitator, but really the idea is that this AI allows people from all over the world, from all sides of the ideological spectrum to come together and have productive conversations.
Nice. Alon says he's going to keep up with it. Thank you very much, Alon.
I think it's Alun.
Alun.
Alun is that?
Yeah, I thought it was like some kind of play on the word.
Right.
Is it Alon or Alun? Okay.
So, Casimir, you're saying as a purely neutral
No,
term.
but that's question 2. I think question 1 might be relevant. Question.
Analyze
the history of Kfar Saba, Arab versus Jewish, and explain in your group property speak how the former can claim to be victims of a Nakba eviction if they aggressed.
I'm not familiar with the Kfar Saba situation, but I think you're still stuck on the moral argument and trying to prove that Israel was good, Palestine bad. That's literally not the conversation we've been having this whole entire time. So again.
But do you want to engage with it?
I don't know enough about the situation, but
let's just imagine that they don't have legitimate rights to Kfar Saba because something happened and they gave it up.
Okay.
Let's say Kfar Saba was originally a Jewish town, and then the Arabs came, and the Jews said, "You can
okay,
live here
so you're saying
whatever,
so right.
whatever.
So if there is aggression from some people, does that justify displacing all people?
I think that's the.
I generally don't support collective punishment. I think it's wrong. So there's a difference between taking out bad actors, those engaging in violence, and then removing their entire families, neighborhoods, and towns. Very, very big difference.
But maybe Casimir believes in collective action, in collective punishment, which I guess, insofar as he is libertarian, would be an interesting reconciling.
Yeah. So
how would you justify collective punishment from a libertarian perspective? Do you know he's libertarian, or
no? I know he's libertarian. Yeah. How do you justify displacing anybody who did not engage in violence themselves? And to say they supported violence, I think that is a new interpretation of the non-aggression principle, which is a libertarian principle for right. I don't think
they may or may not be accepting.
Yeah. But also, there's no way to know who supported and who didn't. So that again, we're talking about collective punishment.
Gandalf actually lives in the Atlas Mountains. That's very cool, Gandalf.
Really?
Nice.
Wait, so
He's not a Jew though.
Oh, so
I went there a few months ago.
He's the person who inspired that question, that answer. He asked him, "What are mountain Jews?"
Oh, that's right.
Okay, well there we go.
Mountain Jews. Okay, it's your neighbors.
Everyone's quick to dump all the blame on the West nowadays. Yeah, look, I think generally blame is not the right way to look at this. It's more so you have a conflict. All parties that can contribute to solving the conflict, we should expect them to contribute, right? So if there's something that Palestinians could do to bring us closer to a peaceful resolution, we should expect that of them. Same goes with Israel, right? We often hear people just trying to focus on blame and not on our expectation of what we can do to solve this. I don't care about blame. Both sides have done horrific things to one another. Both sides, the people of both sides deserve to live on the land in peace. Again, blame is not going to solve it. What actions can both sides do? Now, Israel's far more powerful and has a lot more ability to change the situation on the ground. So I certainly hear the case that they are more responsible. I think that's a very strong and defensible argument. But people then go on to say, because Palestinians are weak, we can't expect anything of them. But I don't think that's true. I think, is there something Hamas could do to bring us closer to peace? Sure. So we should have that expectation.
Well, insofar as there are things that they can do to get us further away from peace, they can certainly do things that get us closer to it. Everybody would agree that Hamas can certainly do things that push us away from peace.
Right. Well, let me think about it. Is there a situation where you could only distance us and not bring us closer?
No. I mean, even just the status quo, right? Even just not doing the thing that is getting us further.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Right. Okay. That is Alun, I did speak about this on my Instagram. So yeah.
And that is Alun now. We know.
It is Alun. It's Alun. Okay. Anyways.
As a purely neutral term, what are ownership claims that you should actually respect as a rational atheist, and why?
So again, this is trying to give a moral judgment on the people living before me. I don't think we have all too much of an issue on property rights today and how we should define them. I don't see any major conflicts connected to that. I just don't think that this is it's an interesting philosophical discussion. I'm not sure how we could actually apply that to today.
But Casimir, if you want to clarify this, what are the kinds of ownership claims that you think would either obviate or validate or reject various things that you're seeing today? What is the impact?
Right. Like the way I look at it is normally the way we got land is through might. It was might makes right. If you're strong enough to take a land, that means you own it. I think it's wise to move away from that. Okay, well, now we have a situation where there's very little contested land. We just need to find it. We could agree that might versus right is bad. Different.
Well, no, I think he's going back. I think if I understand it right, he's still focused on like Ottoman era and like Mandate era. And
Yeah,
he
and
seems to think-
right. So I don't think I literally don't think there's any like objectively right way to deal with property rights in that specific
No,
context.
but he might be building up an objective way in his.
Yeah. Okay. No.
Like,
So
I
no. That's fine. But
Yeah.
I'm sharing. He's asking what we think, and again, I think that there's no like objectively good. It's about moving away from might is right. I think we can agree that that's a good solution. So what is a way to deal with land ownership that is just and will not lead to violence? I think that's generally how we should look at property rights. Different countries have found different systems. They seem to work for the most part. And now we have a few bits of land throughout the world that are still contested, and we need to find a peaceful resolution. But I don't think we could apply traditional property rights to current conflicts in order to solve them. And I'd be interested to hearing if you
Yeah.
think, but I just don't think.
If you think that,
Yeah.
what is the conception of property rights that you? Well, he might not want to revise his conception of property rights in order to solve the conflict. You know what I mean? He might just have like a particular paradigm of property rights in mind, and he's like lensing all of history through that conception, and he's then evaluating who's right and who's wrong on the basis of acceptance
Right.
of that kind of conception.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't sound like a crazy thing to do. I mean, I imagine that I do something very similar.
Yeah,
About,
I don't see
about,
any,
like, sovereignty, for
I don't see
example.
any value in that, but personally.
Yeah.
But I know that's generally you do
Yeah,
like to look
yeah.
at things more in those terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagination says maybe arrest bad actors like any other country.
Maybe arrest
Yeah.
bad actors
Instead of displacing the whole neighborhood.
But sorry, is that a function of technology though?
Being able to arrest.
Arrest bad actors like any other country would do.
I mean, we've been arresting for a long time, but
No, but just imagine like, and you can make, maybe it's a technological case, but just like a power case. Like,
we weren't
if
powerful
the-
enough. We weren't.
Yeah.
I think it's a power case.
yeah, in the 40s, you didn't have. Do you think that the Haganah had the power to go in and arrest bad actors from particular Arab villages that were resisting Israel?
No,
the
no,
issue?
I don't think we had that luxury. I think you can make the cases if we had an ability to arrest people, we should have, and if not, then we could have dealt with them violently. But I think
Does that justify in your mind collective punishment?
no.
So-
I think oof, to justify collective punishment, I mean,
Collective punishment in the sense of displacement.
so that some people in your town are violent.
Yeah.
No.
And you can but what if the alternative is continued harassment, right? Like where you just see existential threat to you and your community.
Well, first of all, I could understand why people would choose to displace a foreign population rather than lose some members of their own, right? Like every group values their own infinitely times more than their enemy, infinitely times more. There's no comparison. Like you could kill, many Israelis would have no problem killing 1 million Jews, just killing 1 million Palestinians to save one Jew. That's not abnormal. You're always going to value your people infinitely more and support doing horrible things to these populations. Yeah. And this is exactly why we have international law, because we can't expect people we should expect it, but like generally speaking, people don't care about those they're in war with and can justify doing horrific things to them. So international law was essentially recognizing that humans have the great capacity for evil against one another. And as technology gets more powerful, that tendency for evil towards foreign populations is very dangerous. Therefore, we're going to create some kind of system that stops populations from destroying each other. So
wait. Okay. But
okay. I can understand why we would want to displace full neighborhoods because it would make us safe. I still think it's wrong to do.
Yeah.
I think,
but if you were to go and whisper to the ear of one of the generals in the Haganah in 47 or early 48, you see a village consistently producing the kinds of bad actors that you wish you could arrest and you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Do you tell them, yalla, displace? Or do you say, don't displace, it's wrong, yet we're going to get killed? What do you say?
I can't put myself in. I just, there's so many factors. Like if I was in that person's shoes, I would be very different. If I had the worldview I had now, then I also have the knowledge of foresight. So it's a very hard hypothetical. But
you think in retrospect it would have been better?
I think the only way to justify collective punishment is if in not doing so, you face an existential threat. So if you're in a situation where it's us versus them, then you could choose us.
But that, I think, is the conception that they had.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps. I don't deny that. I think many saw needing to remove these villages as us versus them.
Are you skeptical?
Yeah, I'm
You're
skeptical. Yeah, I mean, we did leave a lot of neighborhoods, right? We didn't displace all of them. It was very much a decision by a lot of these militias. There was a general understanding that, first of all, tactically it's easier. The less towns you have, the easier it is, right? It's a good tactic. But
well, you think it was a policy of displacement?
Either a policy or just deeply rooted in the culture. It's hard to say, right? We don't have like a report of a command from above that said displace them, but it was more so like a wink and a nod, like do what you need to do. And I don't think it was viewed as necessary by most. But let's say we feared for our lives and we had to do it. So you know how a situation where we collectively punished, what was it, 800,000 Palestinians, right? In that situation, you do one of two things, right? If you're truly doing things morally, you could recognize in hindsight, we did this out of fear. We weren't sure we could survive without this. But now that we won, we can compensate or let people return.
Right. I think that's the
But
key.
what we did was we stole their property, destroyed their neighborhoods, built towns over them, and then when they try to return, we shot at them.
Yes.
You know, like that. So, that's the problematic part. Okay.
I think you have to add a couple more.
Yeah, sure.
So I think you're absolutely right. The moral question in my mind has less to do with the decision to expel, because I don't think it was systematic. I don't think it was a policy and strategic. I do think it was mostly tactical, and I think it came about just through the happenstance of war. This, if you follow Benny Morris, this I think is his conclusion. I'm just like drawing from his book. So if that's the case, then the real moral question isn't about whether or not you asked them to leave in the first place, but why did you not let them come back? And I feel like a lot hangs on that question. But what happened before?
And why not allow them to retrieve property? Like why steal their property?
But here's why. And I think it was a debate also in the Knesset. I don't think everybody agreed on it. Mm-hmm. So it was like there's a big question. They brought it to the Knesset. How should we handle like these refugees? Should they come back? Should they not come back? And I think the government was somewhat divided on this. It wasn't just like in the culture and the zeitgeist in the same way that you imagine. Right. One might imagine. Mm-hmm. It was just baked into the DNA that everybody wants to get rid of them. I don't think it was like this. But the question is, why not have them come back? And I think that's the key question. And I think, but what happened between the displacement of Palestinians and the Israeli refusal to let them return is the displacement of Jews from the Arab world. And that changes the game. Because now, think about this. What are you now going to do?
But interestingly, it doesn't change the morality a little bit.
No, it may, because, so here's what you're going to do. No, but these hundreds of thousands of people are now on your shores. They're in camps, hungry. That's what's happening. So, and now there's place to put them. And what you're going to do instead is to say, no. I will allow the Palestinians to come back, despite me not having the capacity to actually do the kind of security guarantees that you need. I will allow them to come back and then deal with the problem that has just been dropped on my lap and have to deal with this again, too. Now with extra hundreds of thousands of people, having no place to settle them, nothing.
But that would only justify waiting until you let them back, not never letting them return. And that doesn't also justify taking their property and not compensating them. There are different solutions, but also while we then face the major refugee problem, that's not their fault, right? It's true, it's our problem to deal with.
Well, no, but it's
not the Palestinians' fault that Moroccans turned on the Jewish population.
Yeah, but it wasn't the Jews' fault.
No, correct. But you don't like.
But pragmatically speaking,
pragmatically, yeah, I agree.
Pragmatically speaking,
I agree.
you could say no. But in reality, what are you going to do? You have hundreds of thousands of people living in camps.
So you could, pragmatically speaking, you could say
you got to put them in the houses in Jerusalem.
That's fine, but that doesn't mean that there's no compensation and you take your property, right? That's not.
Do a compensation swap.
Yeah. There's still, but also you could wait.
The Arab countries give the money.
Not only that, you could still have a situation where there's still ways to let them return it. It could be once you're able to absorb all the new refugees. Like again, it could just prolong.
That's what, 90s?
No, why not?
80s. I mean, these people are living in like poverty for decades. What do you mean absorb? Like what does absorption really mean?
Letting people who used to live there return it. And
No. Absorption being the trigger. So once you've absorbed, then you let them in. They just lived in poverty for like the next 15 years. It was just like awful living in Israel, right? Like.
Yeah, but like.
So you're saying in the 80s and the 70s?
No. Even before these are
the 60s.
You had communities that many of them were very much self-sufficient. They had their trade. They had their farming. They should have, in an ideal situation. I understand that. I don't think the reason we rejected is what you're describing. I think that maybe gave us a justification. I think the real reason was demographic concern. I understand why we didn't accept it, but it's not that we had too many refugees to deal with. If we did, we could have dealt with them and then let them back. It was a demographic concern that we were scared of. Like also, do you know Palestinian citizens of Israel, they were under martial law until 1967. We had the existing population under martial law. Why would we then let new people in just so they could be under martial law?
Right.
So the rejection wasn't not being able to absorb too many people. We were happy that we finally figured out the demographic concern. Yeah. We figured it out. Why would we then screw ourselves over by ruining that? That was the main. That was the main reason.
That was the main.
Saying
well,
that.
No, I wouldn't say demographic concern. I would say security concern was the main one.
Well, I think it's both. It's not just a security concern. It's if you live in a democracy and you want it to be a Jewish state and you're not 50%, you have a problem. Well, then we would have been like 45% or 60 or 55%. That's not a.
I'm curious about this. Casimir says the word justify needs analysis. You both keep using it, but that is a stolen concept too. You should consider reading Stefan Kinsel about the word. His book LFFS. We'll take a picture of this. Can you move? Thank you.
Ed Ladawi has an interesting.
Ed Ladawi.
There are 750 indigenous displaced. There are 700 illegal settlers. Why don't we just give them their homes? Yeah.
There were 750,000 indigenous displaced. There are 700,000 plus illegal settlers. Allow the return of the 750 in place of the 7. Simply allow equal rights for all. The sentiment will spark peace. Yeah, it's just that the 750K is now 5 million.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I'd like to think we could find solutions without uprooting anybody. Like I don't think that we need to uproot people, but it's an interesting idea. So, Casimir, what does justify mean? So, I'm really not great at identifying terms on the fly, but just for something to be just is like a sense of fairness, right? That it was done in a way that is correct and fair. So when something is justified, you're saying it's correct and fair to do. I think that's generally how we're using.
I think he's going for like he has a whole framework behind it.
What was my analysis on libertarians? This is exactly it. What does justify mean? We've never had an issue.
No. I think it's
no.
Look, maybe this is like my own libertarian.
It's a little autistic. Okay.
No. I there's something almost like geometricianly beautiful about that. Like I love that. So he's right. I mean, who knows what Plato spends a whole book on this, right?
I terms should be defined when our lack of consensus over what they mean is causing confusion in
Yeah,
conversation.
I think he might mean
That's
he might
that's
think
possible. That's possible. But I'm just not. I'm not sure. What I think happens is he hears justify. It he knows that there's some way to break it down semantically with different meanings. So that's just that's what I think's happening here. But again, I think terms are important, right? When we can't agree on a term, it makes sense to define.
back.
No, to define it. But like, I've never had somebody not understand my use of the word justify. But if you think that it's being used incorrectly and it's making this conversation more challenging, then I'm
suspect
actually
it's
interested.
making him not fully go down the path we're trying to lead him. We don't have an agenda, but
Right.
okay.
Zohar
Gandalf.
is asking, when are we going to chat? Hey, brother, great to hear from you. So we're going to do a call-in show Thursday at 1 p.m. EST this Thursday. So if you're around, we'd love to have you join.
For Jews in Morocco, we're like 350,000 population. You're saying they got systematically kicked out? I respectfully
No,
disagree.
it
This
actually-
was documented many times by Moroccan Jews, but I don't know. Am I wrong?
No. They weren't systematically kicked out. The same way many Palestinians weren't systematically kicked out. The Jews in Morocco left because they felt like their neighbors were turning on them. So there was some amount of violence and threats from Moroccans against the Jewish community, which caused a sense of fear, which is what triggered the displacement. It wasn't the Moroccan government saying you need to leave. That's not what happened. But when we look at a significant amount of Palestinian refugees, it was very similar. It wasn't saying you had to leave. It was fear of violence.
It was push and pull
and threats of violence, right? So I agree it's not systematic in that sense, but it is awfully similar to what caused Palestinians to leave.
Okay. Zohar, right on.
Justify means to accept non-aggression as a means of conflict resolution and then have a conversation from the perspective of who was there first.
Wait. Justify means accept non-aggression as means of conflict resolution and then have a conversation from the perspective of who is there. I'm not sure I'm following.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And also, real quick, Hasimir, because you said that collective punishment you disagree with. So would you say that like it was wrong, that the Nakba was entirely wrong for that reason? It is wrong based on non-aggression principles. But there's also the narrative that the Arab leaders asked them to leave, kind of thing.
Yeah,
which that's been discredited. Yeah, but people still do.
Hear me out, Adar, to resolve the conflict, new approach, ayahuasca.
I'm not the one who needs convincing of that. I've been for a long time a believer that psychedelics can help solve the conflict. I mean, even put spirituality aside, let's talk in very scientific terms. Psychedelics are one of the single best ways to heal PTSD, and the amount of trauma both Israelis and Palestinians have make it much harder to solve the conflict. Trauma makes us less empathetic. It makes us more aggressive, more fearful, more emotional and less rational. There's so much rooted in trauma that makes solving conflicts harder. So yeah, anything that could heal the trauma, let's go for it.
Alon says, what do you think? Casimir, I'm waiting for part B. I think there's going to be a B to your Nakba comment. Alon says, what do you think of Amnesty's genocide report? Did you see that? Did you look into that?
No, I saw it slightly. Wait, Amnesty, and then what was the newer one? Human Rights Watch, or was that the one before? One of them said it was genocide. The other said it's committing acts of genocide, which is a slightly different accusation. But I'm not opposed to that term. I've been describing it as mass murder. And my reason was saying I don't understand the term genocide nearly well enough to make a decision, so I was going to leave it to the courts. The courts have not ruled on it, but now having multiple human rights organizations do an assessment and call it genocide, yeah, I mean, do I think to know better than them based on their assessment? I just think, I think often the confusion is like, historically, we think of genocide as the deliberate intention to remove a population from existence, right? I think that's how many people view genocide, which is historically how it was. I think today it's a much broader spectrum, and there's genocide to the extreme, but then there's acts of genocide, which can be like deliberate attacks against civilian population. I would need to read the reports to see exactly how they define it, but I think it's not as simple. It's not a simple black and white, like, are you trying to exterminate this population? Yes. If it's a yes, it's genocide. If it's no, it's not. That's too simplistic of a definition. But generally, those who push back against the genocide claim, I think that's how they're thinking of it. Those who accept the genocide claim, maybe a lot of them are looking at it too liberally. It's every time one party kills a lot of civilians of another side, then that's genocide. I would say, then what's the difference between? It sounds like they're describing a massacre. So I think that there's a broad spectrum for how it's defined. But over time, it does seem more of the international community, human rights groups, attorneys that deal with international law, a lot of them at this point are determining it to be genocide. Does this mean it's right? No, I mean, both authority and masses doesn't make something right. But when it comes to defining terms, when it comes to defining terms, generally terms are defined by consensus. So it's.
But do you think that that's a problem here? So like, if, for example, it's the case that so genocide includes what? Two components, right? Like the first is the intent, and the second, the intent to destroy a population in whole or in part. I think we've spoken about this before, right? Where like the in part seems almost necessarily ambiguous, right? It's almost.
I've never understood that part, but
isn't that the case? Like, so no, you can make a case that says, okay, well, we'll define it by consensus. Fine, you're not going to get consensus, but the majority.
No, that's what I mean, majority, right?
But if so much is hanging on a relatively politically motivated parsing of the term in part, how else would you define in part? It seems like they defined it in this way to deliberately mislead us, to make it so that it is always political.
I actually don't think so. I think the in part is so people can't say, well, we didn't kill them all, or we didn't attempt to kill them all.
Yeah, but then what you open the door to is just killing one person in part. What is the
point? So I think obviously they're not saying just one person,
but right? They're not saying anything.
No, I know. So I think it's a vague legal term. I just don't think it's for the reasons you described. I don't think there's some.
Regardless of what the reason is, right? The reason is you probably couldn't agree on that kind of thing in the first place, and you wanted to operationalize the term nevertheless. But the point is, the moment that you've made it so ambiguous and vague, then it is inherently and inevitably going to be politicized. So can you really trust any organization that says it's genocide or not genocide? Because it all is political.
Right. So I could see a situation where we decide we want to keep genocide as the really extreme version, which is like in a deliberate attempt to exterminate a population, and reserve that for genocide. I'm perfectly okay with that. Yeah. And so in that instance, this is not a genocide. But what many people are saying, it doesn't need to be that bad to be a genocide. It could simply be an unprecedented level of force causing XYZ damage to a civilian population. Yeah. At a certain point, that becomes genocide, right? Like, if you kill, let's say you're
but without with the intent or without the intent, even without the intent.
So I think now what they're saying, I think they're saying there's an intent because of a few things. So the reason they determine it's genocide, they're not just saying that many Palestinians were killed as a result of collateral damage, therefore it's genocide. Right. They're thinking there's been a deliberate war against the Palestinian population, and what they're looking at is really a few main things, but one is that they announced to the world that they're going to not let food and water in. Right. They announced a war crime to the world and implemented that for a few weeks. Yeah. And then there's just been destruction of vital infrastructure that is very hard to justify destroying even for military gain, right? So first, there's just their healthcare system has collapsed. Only 13 of 36 hospitals are functioning. But then you have water pipelines, sanitation plants, power lines, sewage lines, right? All vital. Like Hamas is not using sewage lines for attacks, right? So there's just been a destruction of civilian infrastructure that seems there's unjustifiable no matter how you look at it. So they're saying that is a war against the Palestinian people. That is a genocide. That's roughly how the human rights groups currently are defining it. So it is definitely a more liberal interpretation, but they are seeing intentional destruction of vital infrastructure. And then there's just been many attacks that you have like entire families wiped off the face of the earth, and maybe there's 1 or 2 militants there. So they're saying that's the level of proportionality that also very well may suggest genocide. Which again,
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying either case. Though.
Yeah, I just want to say if that's how the world decides to define genocide, like I'm okay with that definition as well. I'm cool with either definition. Like all good. But
okay,
yeah, what do you think?
No, but this is something. Fahed, I think, is saying something that sounds right. Like destroying everything that can preserve life. So if destroying everything that can preserve life, I think that sounds closer to genocide. Yeah, and like the starvation issue. But I think the starvation issue is not like, maybe you can have made the case that in the first couple of weeks or the first few weeks, there is more of a suggestion of genocide because of the deliberate, insofar as there actually was. I don't know what happened in terms of the food supply.
No, there definitely was.
I know that they said
right.
that they're not going to let food in, and I know that even though food was let in, much of it never really reached.
Correct. It's not just how many calories are getting in. Is there a supply chain? At the end of the day, roads are destroyed, croplands destroyed. It's not just bringing in a certain amount of calories and that fixes the problem. It's if you have
but that's fine. But
that also is Israel's. If people now are dying of starvation and dehydration,
that might still not be
Gaza.
Genocide.
No,
Even
that's
if
true.
all of them die.
But you would agree that's Israel's responsibility. If a warring party destroys a nation's ability to produce and import their own food and transport their own food, then who's then responsible? Right.
I'm directionally agreeing. I think the details I would probably have to sound a little bit like Casimir here on like parsing responsibility. Because I think operationalizing that concept is a little hard for me.
I'm very cool with shared responsibility. It's very hard to parse in terms of percentages, but I say it very clearly. Israel and Hamas are complicit in the mass murder of the Palestinian people. I think that's just a very.
I think that would be a fair kind of.
Yeah, I don't. Beth,
I think, is saying that is not Israel's responsibility. I'm sure that is Hamas responsible for anything. You see that but
there's a delay. So Beth will hear what we just said, but.
Oh, I'm not sure. I think she might have reacted. Oh, yeah.
No, there's a little, but many people genuinely think that Israel bears no responsibility. So 100% responsibility is on Hamas and 0 is on Israel. But no, they're both responsible. They're both very much responsible.
Yeah, Beth heard this. No, I think the delay is not what's causing this.
Then you're 100% wrong. Of course, it's Israel's responsibility. Both common sense, moral understanding, and international law agree with this. Why should Gazans lose their right to life because they're ruled by a terror organization, right? So let's say Hamas is not caring for their people, and we've agreed that they need to be destroyed. So you're telling me all Gazan civilians then lose protection? They lose human rights? They don't deserve the right to life? Is that what you're saying? And Israel can kill them because it's Hamas's fault, right? Let's say
she's not saying that Israel is. Well, Beth,
no.
You're saying that.
Yeah, I get this sense. Maybe I'm wrong, but no. I don't know Beth, but I see the energy. That is not Israel's responsibility. All in caps. I know the energy,
well,
but
Beth,
I
just
hope
previously you also said
that's not what she's saying. She said that's not what she's saying. Okay. Let's hear.
We're gonna give her the space to explain herself. Casimir says.
You see, this is why I don't really engage with him seriously. He goes, don't use the word Hamas. It gives the other side escape. Use Islamist militants, aka 90% of the Gazan population. So Casimir, this is his way to support actual genocide.
Okay, but
he said, no, but he's saying 95% of the population.
Well, he's not saying that 95. You have to kill everyone.
No. He's saying you can. You can. Militants you can kill.
Oh yeah, that's right. No,
I
think you are saying that.
Yeah.
But actually, Casimir, if that's what you're saying, I think we have a Gazan here, no? Didn't you say that Fahed?
Well, Fahed, he is in the 5%, he would say.
Fahed, no, but he might have an intuition on this.
Oh, he does.
Fahed, can I ask you if you're still here? How many? Okay, Casimir here is saying that 95% of Gaza is Islamist militants.
50% of Gazans are under 18. I know it's ridiculous.
But
50% are women, 50% are like.
How much of this is true? Do you have a sense of, if you had to pick a number on the percent of Islamist militants in Gaza, Fahim, if you don't mind, Fahid, if you don't mind to tell us.
I think at the beginning you were surprised that I was being rude to Casimir. Now when he had his mask off moment, I think you understand why I just don't take him seriously. No.
Wait. Beth says that you're taking her words too far. Oh,
Okay.
But I think Fahid just responded. Let's see. Fahid says, yes, I hear you. Adar, I believe you infantilize Gazans and insult their intelligence by rendering them helpless in your intellectual arguments. 50% are under 18. Exactly, he says. Okay.
Yeah, so Beth, it seems like you actually don't understand my position at all. And I said this earlier, but we should expect people to act a certain way. People who commit crimes should be held accountable. But if somebody does not act the way you want them to, they don't lose their right to life. That's not infantilization. It's recognizing different cultures are different. So there's kind of this thing where Fahid goes 2 to 3%, I think. But just real quick, there's kind of this thing where people think the solution to a culture they don't like is to say that that culture is bad. What culture in the history of the world has changed because another culture told them they were bad? You're not going to find a single example. So I care about solutions, not you making a moral judgment about, oh, we're the good ones, they're the bad ones, they need to be held responsible. There's nothing there that leads to a solution. Cultures are emerging systems. Nobody in a culture can change the culture significantly. It requires actual systemic change. You need to change the environment for the culture to change. The conditions change, the culture changes. Saying that culture isn't acting responsibility doesn't lead us to any solutions. And saying that and recognizing that a culture isn't what you want it to be doesn't mean they lose their right to life. So again, it's just not. I don't see it as a legitimate
Beth
argument.
is saying she's not arguing Gazans don't have the right to life. She's just, I think, arguing that it is not Israel's responsibility to ensure.
No, this is about the infantilization. Where's their infantilization to recognize that of course they're going to want to fight an entity that's been oppressing them for 100 years? Is that infantilization or understanding human nature? Right? It's not infantilization.
Is there an? Okay,
No. Human. Look, am I infantilizing Israelis when I say I get why they've become somewhat genocidal? Am I infantilizing Israel? No. If we can't recognize human nature for what it is and try to change systems and institutions to impact human nature, then what are we doing? You could just sit on the sidelines and say, I don't like the Gazans. They need to change. Cool. You'll say that your whole entire life. Those who can actually come up with ideas and implement ideas to change the environment will change the culture. Not those sitting on the sidelines.
Wait. Could it be that you're infantilizing the culture by recognizing that the culture is infantile, or the human nature is infantile, like on both sides?
Yeah, but that's not the suggestion she's saying. Saying to infantilize, it's often used. It's more effectively used against individuals. So I'll tell you when there's a good use of infantilization. So let's say. And you see this in American social justice. If a black person, let's say, will loot a store, and I'm not trying to perpetuate stereotypes, but this is a relevant example. A black person will loot a store. You will hear, oh, well, we need to just understand that they are products of their environment and they're just lashing out because of the oppression that they face.
Yeah.
That's infantilization, right? What in reality we need to do is understand that that's true. This person is a product of their environment, and we ought to change the environment to produce less people that think looting a store is okay. But there's a law matters, and if somebody's breaking the law and looting a store, they should be held accountable. And in holding people accountable, you actually create a system that disincentivizes such behaviors. So I do think there is this concept of infantilization, and I do see it as problematic. But to recognize that a culture is going to act a certain way because of their environmental conditions, or that's how that culture views the world, that's not infantilization. That's just grappling with reality for what it is, right? If we want to change the world, we need to recognize reality for what it is.
I actually don't know what Beth was referring to you infantilizing. But maybe if Beth wants to say, like, how was he infantilizing them? But I also do think that
I know exactly. Yeah, for sure.
So, Fahid, I think if you're still here, I don't know at what point you left Gaza, but do you have a sense? I don't know how to pronounce that, is asking what % of Gazans celebrated and gave out baklawas on October 7th?
No, over 90%. How could you even make an assessment like that? Like based on what?
Poll surveys.
No. I'm genuinely interested. How could you, for first like 90%? I mean,
You can't get 90% to do anything.
no.
Right?
I just don't like. How do you even if you saw, even if it was 10,000 people, 10,000 people, that's half of 1%. We didn't see even 10,000 people do it. So the amount of people that actually went out.
No,
again,
no, but
well, we didn't see. We don't know how many did.
Yes, no,
but we don't have evidence of more than a fraction of 1%.
Yes, but what you do have evidence of is that half of whatever 1% felt comfortable to go out on the street and hand out baklavas. What does that mean to you? I don't know, but it doesn't mean nothing. It means that enough of the culture probably thought that this is decent behavior. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what to make of that.
It's actually quite easy to make sense of it.
Yeah.
Most Palestinians, most Gazans, and this I actually learned from Fahed and Muhammad al-Sharif, who, rest in peace, passed away from an airstrike or was killed by an airstrike. They both explained, and then polling supported this, most Gazans don't think any civilians were targeted on October 7th.
That's right.
Even the polling today shows that.
Yeah.
The 90+% don't think any war crimes were committed. They don't think civilians were targeted. To them, it was a successful military operation. So, okay. But also, wait, hold on. It's also possible that you can have a
Wait. But they also make a distinction between, many of them don't make a distinction between a civilian. They think that there are no innocent civilians in Israel.
No, I think maybe of military age men. No, children and stuff. They don't view, most Islamists are not going to view children as guilty. They view children as Muslim.
Most of them would.
I could see a case like all military age men they would consider to be by default.
Anybody even older than military age men.
Well, let's see, Fahed, what do you think?
Fahed, no, well, actually, but interesting to hear from Fahed. But you also get Islamic scholars who say that very explicitly that there are no civilians in Israel.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you even have some Westerners saying that at this point.
No, exactly. So all I'm saying is that it isn't. You don't have to rely on thinking that only military-aged men,
right?
Or only military personnel.
Sure, but I will give you an anecdote. The way I discovered that Palestinians don't think civilians were killed, when I was interviewing Muhammad right after October 7th, he on stream said, "Yeah, most Gazans they're happy because no civilians were harmed." So he was making a distinction there. Like he recognized that there's a category of civilians.
Zohar, I don't know what you mean. I think, can you correct this?
Yeah.
He says almost the same amount of people who gave out baklavas mistake when Sinwar died. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Oh, that gave out. Oh, I think because Israelis were giving out baklavas when Sinwar died.
What is this? This is a when?
Yeah, it's just a type of when.
When? How do you know? Okay.
By mistake? Oh, yeah. No, I'm not sure. So Beth goes, Palestinians have been telling us since 1948 that they want to live with Jews, that they don't want to live with Jews. Why can't we take them at their word? I mean,
I take them at their word.
Yeah, same. I'm not sure I understand.
But I think she might say that if they are trying to not live with the Jews, then why do you think that they are innocent if they ended up getting killed? And why do you think that Israel is therefore a responsible party for killing them?
What I would say is not wanting to live next to a neighbor that has oppressed you and taking your land doesn't make you guilty and punishable by death. It makes you a human responding very, very normally. But I would go on to say they've been saying this since 1948. Longer, but in fact, we have lived side by side for thousands of years. And again, the situation in Ottoman Palestine was not perfect, but it was certainly above the global average. Jews were moving from Europe to Ottoman Palestine to live next to their Arab neighbors. And at that point, they were accepted. It was when there was an attempt to have a Jewish homeland on their land that there was no rejection. So again, you change an environment. Essentially what you're saying is exactly what I'm saying. You change the environment, you change the people. Today, Israelis and Palestinians are more radical than they've ever been. That's what happens when you're in conflict for 100 years. Conflict radicalizes us. So right, we need to create environmental conditions that are hospitable for peace. To whichever extent we can impact the environment to achieve those goals, we need to. And just to say, they're saying this, take their word for it, and just maintain the status quo is, on one hand, illogical, and I view it to be unethical. The status quo is not a moral system, and we can't just maintain it as a matter of policy. We need to be dedicated to solving the conflict by any means necessary. Palestinian well-being depends on it, but so does our survival on the land. If we can't solve the conflict, then there's no guarantee we'll
Yeah,
survive on the
I
land.
actually don't think you can even sustain the status quo. I don't really
No,
believe
I
in
mean,
the status quo. No,
no.
in the sense that like even if you try to preserve the status quo, it is continuing to erode. And I don't think it's eroding in Israel's favor.
Well, I mean, but our current leadership thinks in 4-year terms. You know, we don't have like a problem with democracy. You don't have this like future of like a visionary trying to solve a 20-year problem. So right now we've had leadership that's done very little to change the status quo for decades. Interestingly, Bennett wanted to change it. Bennett had these ideas to reduce the conflict.
Elbow is saying something interesting, I think. We pop you. Over 90% of Gazans also celebrated and handed out baklawas when the Oslo Accords were signed, till they came to believe they were duped.
I'm going to also say
You know?
that wasn't 90% because there's 90% is just
I
not
just
a
don't
number.
know how many baklawas they have.
But yeah, but that is a good.
These would be millions of baklawas.
That is a good point. That is a good point.
Beth says, most Palestinians do not want to live side by side with Jews. You infantilize them by saying you know better than they do about what they want.
Yeah, I'm just not following.
90% of the people have baklava already.
In fact, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but a lot of people are like, how did you not change after October 7th? How didn't you change? Nothing surprised me. Like people are like, what, you thought they could do that? Yeah, obviously. I'm not naive in that sense. I recognize what those who want to kill us are capable of doing. So no, I don't have any delusion of public sentiment. In fact, you know, the fact that I've been so in the thick of it for so many years, I think I have a pretty damn good understanding of what Palestinians currently want. I just recognize that could change very, very quickly. Like I certainly don't blame people for hating their enemy, because I have a basic understanding of human psychology. There's no reason to expect people in conflict to not hate one another. That's the norm, obviously.
Oh man, Gandalf said, not true, Adam, and I don't know what you were responding to, but I do. But Fahid is saying not true to the fact that they know that they kidnapped people. I think that's what he's referring to. Fahid, if you can please tell us, what do Gazans think that there's hostages?
Right, yeah, like somebody's asking about Kfir Bibas, who it seems that Kfir was killed in an airstrike. At least that's what was reported. But that was a little ginger baby that was taken. He wasn't even a year old. Do Gazans know that?
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
That civilians were taken?
Zohar is saying, Adam, what do you know about what many of them think?
This is
to be honest, I don't even remember what the context was.
Well, Adam, what do you know that one?
Adam, have you served in the IDF too? I did not serve in the IDF. I left Israel when I was younger.
Mishtamet.
Can you scroll up? Adam, I recently reviewed the channel of a USA-raised Muslim convert who preaches basic religious fundamentals. He has no video on the 7th, and his video on the 9th does not cover the attack at all. Okay. Didn't know they gave out baklawas during Oslo Accords. Good to know. What Islamic scholars? Can you give an example? Yusuf Qaradawi. I read him and studied him, and he says that. Read him in Arabic. Took me about 2 days to translate one page. There's Islamic, can you scroll up? There's Islamic words for war. They cannot target civilians and include kids and elderly and women, and it's mostly those engaging in battle.
Yeah, exactly. That was my understanding of it. And again, that doesn't mean there's no deviation from this, but
yeah, no, I think Yusuf Qaradawi does say that pretty explicitly.
Yeah.
And I think Hamas says that he's their spiritual guide.
Casimir says that I can name you many human tribes that did not respond with genocide of violence to being oppressed or even deprived of land.
Oh, please.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing a tribe that got their land taken that did not engage in violence. And I would actually, I would not ask you to find me one. I would ask you to show me, because one is an exception that proves the rule. I would actually ask to see a trend that proves that what I'm saying here is wrong. But violence to those taking your land or your sovereignty is the absolute norm. I mean, Jews did it every time. We never got our land taken without fighting. Never. The fact that Palestinians, they're just more like us than we care to admit. What about hate being taught the other way? I think it's different from each community and school system within Israel, but like, I think most children in Israel are not taught to hate. There's, I think more than anything, just an apathy. There's just a general indifference.
I think they're taught to fear. I think.
I would say that. I was taught to fear growing up. I wasn't taught to hate Palestinians. I was taught if we don't defend ourselves against them, then we'd be killed. I was not taught to hate them or that we should harm them. It was more so that we need to defend ourselves against them. And honestly, it's possible that upbringing very much allowed me to see the way I see things today. You know, that I wasn't taught to hate. I was taught that defense is necessary. But I do think that as the generations go by, the Israeli population is becoming more and more hateful. I think after October 7th, it hit all-time highs. Like right now, what percent of the Jewish population have some kind of hate for Palestinians? Probably over 20%, in my opinion. But I think the most common feeling is just an apathy. It's an indifference or a fear. They don't care if something happens to them. They feel burdened by the Palestinians. Not so much like I fucking hate those people, we should kill them. I don't think that's certainly not the majority, but that is a growing sentiment.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to go over.
We said we're going to do a quick.
Oh my goodness!
We're going on 2 hours.
A quick one.
There's no quick stream. There's
I
no
didn't realize
such thing.
that, and we needed to go. We have to do a budget call.
Still
Fahad is saying occupation is the source of all evil. I blame the occupation. I'm curious about that because I think a lot of people look at October 7th and then they say, well, you have to explain October 7th. There's context to it. You know, the conflict didn't start on October 7th. The Palestinians have been living under occupation, and that is the context. I think that, I don't know if you're referring to this, but...
He's not talking about the occupation of the West Bank. He's talking about in general. I'm pretty sure he's talking about...
He says, I blame the occupation. Which occupation?
Like the occupying power, Israel.
No, yeah.
Yeah, but not just like the occupation of the West Bank, also the siege on Gaza.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying, well, unless he's... But he's... Do you think in justification for October 7th? Or in justification of what?
Well, just the whole thing.
Yeah, but I'm saying, so I think that the issue isn't, I think that you could play the exact same like causality game backwards. And you could say, oh yeah, Israel is now responding to what happened on October 7th. Fine. Okay, but October 7th is reacting to occupation, to decades of occupation. Fine. But what are decades of occupation responding to? Why have an occupation in the first place? I think you could also come up with the context game and you could keep playing that backwards. And that's why I think someone in the beginning said, well, actually the issue is you're not talking enough about violence in the 20s, violence in the 20s and the 30s. I think these things justify, or not justify, but explain Israeli response in the 40s. Whatever is happening with the Arab states, you know, with Jordan and in Egypt, in Syria and Lebanon in the 60s then explains an occupation. So you could blame the occupation, but I think to solve it, you have to go backwards.
Well, let's think about that. I mean, identifying why there's an occupation perhaps is important, but the solution still lies primarily in the occupying power. Like,
why is that necessarily true?
Well, it's not, there are instances where there are ways in which the conflict could be solved without Israel doing anything, right? If Palestinians tomorrow wake up and say, we support Israel's right to exist, we lay down our arms, no more violence, we'll accept this strip of land here, some strip of land in the West Bank, all good, that could solve the conflict, right? So when we look at, is there a unilateral way in which Palestinian society can achieve peace? I would say yes. Yeah. But if that's what we're relying on to achieve peace, then we're just going to continue waiting perhaps for eternity.
That's right.
Right. So it's like an expectation for a culture to just accept.
No. But the expectation is equally preposterous backwards. Or on the other side, you can't just expect the responsibility isn't on Israel not to occupy. The expectation is that Israel does various things so that it doesn't have to occupy. But
Exactly. It's the maintained occupation as the status quo without an extreme effort to change it. Like Israel needs to be in the mindset that every day that that Palestinians need to live under their military rule is a tragedy, and work to end that tragedy. That needs to be the mentality of us, our people, and our government in order to fix this. Not say, it is what it is. We'll just continue the occupation for forever, or continue the status quo forever. Like, that's not an acceptable thing to say.
But just to be to be fair to them, they might not be saying that. They might be saying we maintain an occupation while we still have an intransigent population that is deeply hostile to us, and instead let us try to work out geopolitical maneuvers and tactics so that those people don't remain as radicalized as they do because they're being pumped with information and propaganda from the outside world. Not that I think this is true. I think that might be the tactic that they're going about. So I think you have to add a few more constraints to what you're saying. They have to also resolve the occupation.
There's nobody who's a decision maker in the Israeli government that's looking at things that far ahead.
Bibi says that. He says that all the time. That's a strategy.
He says that.
No, I know, but he could even demonstrate doing that.
Bibi, as most politicians, are driven by trying to stay in power.
For sure.
Trying to stay in power.
I'm just saying that, like, it isn't just enough to say that we're not committing to maintain an occupation. You have to actively work to dismantle it, I think, with the people on the ground.
Correct.
I think that's the key. It isn't just not to maintain it. Because he could say, I'm not trying to maintain it, I'm just trying to go from the outside in. I'm trying to work with all of the Arab partners. I'm trying to build Abraham. I think anything that doesn't involve the local population, I think, should be rejected outright.
Well, I think it's okay to work with. I think it's okay to build a coalition.
Yeah, but
not at the expense.
You have to involve.
No. For sure. The fact that we haven't negotiated with either faction in 20 or so years, like, that's just unacceptable. The fact that we continue to expand outward in the West Bank, which just requires more military personnel, like that's unjustifiable. To say, we need a secure border, we need checkpoints on our border. Like all that, you could there's a lot that we do that can very easily be justified purely for security, but then there's a lot that we do that comes down that's a result of nationalism, religious dogma, or just even call it just a desire to be excessive in force. Like, what is the justification for not having a much stronger level of accountability for soldiers that abuse their power, right? Like, that's just lack of political will to make that happen. Right, but every time a Palestinian waits at a checkpoint and they're treated disrespectfully, that radicalizes Palestinians. We're radicalizing every day. We radicalize the population that we're trying to make peace with.
Yeah,
that's not acceptable, right?
It's self-defeating.
No, for sure. And then to say, but look at them. Look at them. They are a product of an environment that we have created to a large extent.
So. Okay, so there's a few things here. One, Casimir is saying, I challenge you to a conversation, not even a debate, where I will be on video and patiently and thoroughly trade questions to test your worldview. Adar can watch. I'm down. I don't mind. I think I'll have a good time chatting with you. But I got another thing. On the topic, keep going. Adam, the Zionist plan was an ethno-state settler colony. What do you mean the occupation is a response to the violence? Zionists got British colonial backing since 1917.
That's when you said the start of the conflict was.
Yeah. So Adam, I said that was the Zionists got British colonial backing since 1917. Yeah, no, that's right. I think that is true. But I don't think that what you're saying now is direct reaction. I think what you're saying now is direct reaction to occupation. Why do the Israelis have control over the West Bank and Gaza? I don't think it's because of what happened in 1917. I mean, obviously it's related, but I think that it's probably much more related to things that happened in the 60s.
Right, like the siege on Gaza is not a result of Jewish fundamentalism wanting to establish, wanting to reclaim our historical
That's
homeland.
right.
Like that has another motivation.
That's right.
But I do think that the West Bank is very much connected to the same type of mindset of. Actually, I wouldn't go to say that because the original Zionists were secular. For them, it was really just about having a place where they could be safe.
I think they let the demons out.
They saw an opportunity in Palestine, but a lot of expansion today, a lot of it is a result of secular nationalism. It's not all religious fundamentalism.
Yeah, although I think it's becoming more and more religious.
I would agree, and I think those are probably the segments, those in cabinet in the Knesset that have political sway in order to keep settlement expansion popular and going, right? It's primarily ruled by, but I would say that is in a similar brand. There's certainly you can make the connection that us coming to establish a homeland here and then us expanding outward is an extension of the original.
It's not an extension.
Well, of expansionist Zionism, which very much does have roots in the early 1900s. Like there was always even Ben Gurion had said it doesn't need to be by force. We could continue to expand through economics. Like there was an idea that we'll take any piece of land we can get and then work to expand it.
Expand it in order to create ultimately just like a viable state, but not just like an ultimately expansionist. Not the kind of like greater Israel
it wasn't,
that you see now.
It wasn't because God said so.
Exactly, which is very different from the brand it has today. But I think the brand it has today is trying to rebrand as, this is just secular Zionism.
But they're almost allies, right? It's.
I think they happen to be allies right now because of security arguments.
Yeah.
If you take away the security argument, but this is why I'm saying 1967.
Correct.
If Jordan doesn't send rockets and missiles on Jerusalem, right? On West Jerusalem? I think West Jerusalem in 67. If Jordan doesn't engage in the war, I don't know if Israel would have the West Bank today. Wait, there's one more thing here. Adam, I disagree with your interpretation. Are you claiming that Arab violence in the 1920s was the first cause? Gandalf is asking. The first cause? No, I don't. I just saying. All I'm saying is like you can just keep chaining the causality here. You could say. You could keep going back to just human nature, right? Ultimately, but is it the most immediate cause? Well, I think the fact that Arabs on the land, that Palestinians in the 1920s reacted violently, triggered a Jewish violent reaction, of course. But I'm not blaming them, and I'm not saying that they are at fault because of it, right? They are also reacting to more context. We could just keep pointing back the context.
I think the only pointing blame for the sake of finding who's at fault is not helpful. We should point. It's about pointing, as I said earlier. You point your fingers to whoever can make a change. Yeah. Right.
Fahid, you're asking, and Adam, do you know that your government issued my ID number? Without it, I'm not a Gazan nor a Palestinian.
Anybody at this point who watches this channel knows that the Palestinian Population Registry is controlled by Israel, which gives us verifiable data out of Gaza to estimate the minimum death toll.
Yeah.
Casimir has been arguing with that, but I don't think he understood the actual.
Fahid, not only do I know that, I fight to resist that. And I think that Gazans should be free like any other people should be free. And they should issue their own ID in whatever way they see fit.
The reason I brought that up is the last discussion I had with Casimir in the questions he said, when I say that there's verifiable data out of Gaza, he said that's just completely made up and there's no basis for that. So that's Zohar goes, again, the first violence against Zionists was a response to the idea of a Jewish ethno-state. The response to the Palestinian resistance has been more occupation. Yeah.
The first violence, put again. The first violence against Zionists was a response to the idea of a Jewish ethno-state. The response to the Palestinian resistance has been more occupation. Yeah,
and more violence.
Yeah.
But It is a good point because we kind of like, okay, they didn't accept partition. We should be able to understand why. The result was us just taking more of their land. They didn't accept that, so we took more of their land. It's like
Wait, no, it's not that.
we literally pretty much every opportunity, aside from a few when we gave back Gaza, was you were violent towards us. We're going to expand our territory. When it was us having sovereignty over land that they have historically lived on is the source of so much of the conflict. Our solution to solve it has been to just do more of the same.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Which is
kind of crazy.
No, wait, but has arguably been totally rational. Like
I would say 40. I would go as far to say that the expansion we did in 48, I think, is rational because we didn't really have a defensible piece of land. Yeah. I thought, like, I could see how.
You think 67 isn't defensible?
No, well, not. I think holding that land for security is defensible. I don't think moving people into that land is. I think there's.
Do you think there are better ways to hold land than moving people onto it?
Yeah. You could hold it with your military, not by.
I'm open to that possibility, but I think that's the major pushback that you get from settlers and from a lot of the like.
Sure. I mean,
and who are ideological, not religious necessarily.
When you move a few 100,000 people onto a piece of land, that requires security, more security, not protecting your border, protecting new borders you created. You're using military personnel to protect communities rather than the border. And one of the reasons why October 7th happened is, again, we had a lot of units in the West Bank trying to protect communities living there. But it doesn't make us safer.
No, but I agree.
Not to mention it radicalizes the population.
I agree. I don't buy that argument, but I think that is an argument you have to contend with because it is persuasive to a lot of people. Because when you look at what actually stopped October 7th, it wasn't soldiers. It was police officers. It was the people in Otef Aza in the envelope that ended up just going out and getting their own guns.
Yeah, but
the people that were living there because they're living there because the army wasn't there.
Because it was a major military failure.
Yeah, but exactly. But you can rely on there being major military failures. What you can't rely on is all of a sudden the population is going to leave. The population is going to be there. They're going to wake up. They have a gun. They go to the to the storage. They pick up the gun and they fight. And that's how you actually preserve the land, and that's how you preserve security. I mean, I don't believe in this.
No. I mean,
but I think
but even just geographically, if there were a strip of communities right on the border of the West Bank, I would say they act as a buffer.
Yeah.
But when you're in there, no. If you want to infiltrate Israel, you don't need to you don't need to walk through gated settlements, deal with all the armed people there just to get in Israel proper. Like it's not. That's not compelling. I think people like to say that argument because it doesn't sound good to say God said so. So we say we need it. We need to move people in here for security.
Not just that. I think it's the other way around.
I don't think there's.
I think that if there's no security argument, I think it would be irreligious for you to be there, and they believe that.
Oh no!
No. Like the big rabbis and all, they always say.
How would it be irreligious if that's that's our?
If it puts Jewish life at risk, you can't live there. You can't live there if it increases the probability of Jewish death. The only reason you can live there is if it increases.
Fine, but I mean, then you could claim that all of Israel shouldn't exist on religious grounds because you have a better chance of dying because you're Jewish in Israel than any other place on earth today.
I don't know if that's true.
Think about it.
No, I'm not sure that they would believe that that's true.
Well, I mean, okay,
no, but I'm saying that is
it
happens to align very nicely the religious argument and the security argument. But the religious argument is sitting on top of the security.
Yeah.
Argument.
So I would go to say that there's actually no compelling security argument to moving your people into the West Bank, and I would go on to say even if there was, it's still not justified.
I think that's right.
It's still not justified.
I think that's right.
Our military presence there is inherently oppressive. The reason we need so much military presence is to protect like 700,000 Jews living there. It's made the conflict harder to solve. It's radicalized the Palestinians.
And not just that, I think it is making a one-state solution in Israel's disfavor.
Exactly.
Much more likely.
Yeah. I'll read this one.
Yeah, Adam, I think your understanding of the Zionist brand is a result of our common indoctrination. There were several Zionist factions with various aims, less and more inclusive and expansionist. No, I believe that. I mean, some of them didn't even want, some of them were just purely cultural, right? Some of them just wanted like a cultural sense, like, what was it? Echad Ha'am, for example, was one of those. yeah, it's a whole spectrum of different ideologies under Zionism, and some of them were more inclusive than others. I get that, but I think
Yeah.
that the more kind of like expansionist, militant, what is the Jabotinsky's like the Iron Wall,
Iron Wall,
the
yeah.
Iron Wall, like all of that began to gain favor when in the 20s, not in the 20s, in the 30s, in the mid 30s, in the middle of the Arab Revolt. So I think the conditions on the ground made certain interpretations of Zionism much more emergent.
Yeah, and I would come out to defend Adam and say if he was at all indoctrinated, then he wouldn't see me as a worthy co-founder, because those who are indoctrinated think that I'm a radical. Those who are not think
He's the solution.
maybe. And then he's also read hundreds of books on the conflict, so can't say the same for myself. Let's see. So, Customary, you're asking about the death toll. The way we can estimate the civilian death toll is actually by looking at women, children, and elderly that have been killed. And then if we were to assume that civilian men are dying at the same rate as women, you get a number. But it's actually wrong to believe that civilian men are dying at the same rate as women, because in all conflicts, civilian men die at a higher rate. They're more likely to be suspected of being combatants. They're more likely to take risks like getting food, water, and aid. We've also gotten many whistleblower reports out of Gaza from IDF soldiers, as well as video and photo evidence to corroborate the fact that military-age men are being targeted. Unarmed military-age men are being targeted. So we have a lot of information. We know how many children have been killed. We know the ages of these children. We know the women and elderly that have been killed. Yes, so you can reach an estimate. This whole idea that there's nothing out of Gaza that's verifiable and you can't reach any estimate is just not grounded in reality. We have a list that's verifiable, and that gives us a lot of information. And through recognizing different patterns, you could present different hypotheses on what the data says. Data tells a story. You fill it, and where you need to fill the gaps of your knowledge, you can use historical references from other conflicts. You can use testimonials, but ultimately you should present a range, because there's no way to know the death toll. You can know a range, taking all these factors into account. I've done a live stream where I do a very deep analysis on this. I've written about this, but yeah, feel free to ask a follow-up. There's certainly a way to get an estimate of the death toll. And I would say the minimum amount is 50,000 civilians. It might be significantly higher.
Oh yeah, Zara is saying, Adam, can you explain to me the security rationale of placing citizens in a hostile? Let's go down. In a hostile occupied territory. He probably asked that before we got into it, right? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
If you want, I can go through that.
Right,
because I do think that is the argument that most. Like, why is Israeli society so incompetent with respect to clearing out the settlers, even though many of them disagree with settlers? I think it's because they tend to make security arguments that sound persuasive to Israelis. And if you want Israelis to resist that, I think you have to inoculate them against bad arguments from settlers. So, yeah, I think it's important to be in dialogue with them.
So just to continue, Casimiras, is a 14-year-old child soldier considered part of the military death count or as innocent child count? Good question. And you see, this is how data can actually paint a picture. When we look at how many boys have been killed compared to girls, there's an excess of around 1,700. So we could assume, right, that out of the 13,000 children that have already been killed, that 1,700 of them are combatants. There's no reason to believe that girls are going to die at a higher rate than boys. But when we actually look at the data, we know that the excess boys is not 1,700, because we start to see boys dying at a higher rate than girls as young as age 7. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13-year-old boys are dying at a higher rate than girls of those ages. We also know that teenage boys, 15, 16, 17, are more likely to be killed for the same reason civilian men are more likely to be killed. So it's very likely that there's actually very few child combatants on the list, if any at all. And certainly, maybe there are a few hundred. It's still negligible when looking at the big picture. So yes, we can know that this number isn't highly inflated with child soldiers. Thanks for asking. Jay Jones says you think I'm wrong on the 50,000 civilians. I get that. I'd be interested in hearing what your assessment is based on the available evidence. I reached this conclusion by the list we have available. That list is between 80 to 100% civilians. This doesn't mean that combatants haven't died. It just means that they are just not being added to the list. So I'm not making a claim on how many combatants have been killed, but the list we have of I think it's 41,000 names. That list is 80 to 100% civilians. The way you could reach that again is you look at women, children, and elderly. You could look at the difference between boys and girls to identify how many boys might have been combatants. And then the 80 to 100 really depends on at what rate are civilian men dying higher than women. I think a fair guess would be, let's say, around 90%. So you take 90% of 41,000. That's your base of those killed. I believe that comes out to 35 or something thousand. So how do I get to 50? Well, there's still many people unaccounted for, right? We've seen record levels of infrastructural damage in Gaza. Many people are buried under rubble and unaccounted for. We just got reports of cats and dogs eating people on the streets. These people have not been accounted for yet. There's many people under rubble. We also haven't accounted yet for indirect deaths, right? People dying from malnutrition and disease as a result of the collapse of the healthcare system in Gaza. Some wars, the majority of those killed are actually from indirect deaths and not direct deaths. So because we don't know unaccounted for, and because we don't know indirect deaths, the range is large, right? It could be 150,000 if indirect deaths are really the majority of deaths. I don't know what they are. So I'm assuming with a high degree of certainty that at least another 15,000 have been killed that have not been identified or from indirect deaths. That's how I reach 50,000. That's not some high estimate. It's actually a very reasonable low estimate.
This was fun.
Yeah, should we wrap it?
I think we have to.
Okay.
Should we do more spontaneous ones?
Yeah. I mean, the viewership grew over time. Let's see how this does in general. Is this the best use of our time when we're building an early stage startup? And guys, so real quick, if you want to join headon.ai, ping me. It's a platform that really. Here's really the vision. Here's the vision. Millions of people from all over the world, from all sides of the ideological spectrum, coming to have meaningful, respectful, and productive conversations on the platform. The conversations are led by an AI facilitator helping people speak longer, understand each other better, and hopefully find common ground. That's what we're building. If you want to be involved in any capacity, reach out. Let's talk about it. Adam, thank you for inspiring this. And we were eating dinner, having a little argument. He's like, let's live stream this. I'm like, okay, let's live stream it. And chat, whoever's watching this, if you like this, let us know in the comments if you like it, because if you do, we'll do more of these spontaneous ones.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Nice.